Daniel set the sewing machine on the porch as if it were something dead and unpleasant. "There," he said, straightening with one hand pressed to his lower back. "That thing weighs more than you do. It always has." He did not smile. Rainwater ticked from the sagging porch roof onto the warped boards between them. Behind him, the dark sedan waited on the gravel lane with its engine running. Laura had texted twice during the drive. Both times, Daniel had glanced at the screen and then turned it face down in the cup holder. Evelyn looked past him at the cottage. Peeling white clapboards, 2 dim front windows, a brick chimney rising through a steep roof blotched with moss. The orchard climbed the hill behind it, row after row of black wet branches dissolving into October mist. Daniel held out a ring with 3 keys. "It's worthless as a house," he said. "The land might bring something. You should sell before winter." He dropped the keys into her palm, carried neither suitcase inside, and drove away. Only after his taillights disappeared did Evelyn discover there was no running water. She stood at the kitchen sink with one hand on the cold metal tap and the other still closed around the keys. The faucet gave a hollow shudder. Something knocked beneath the floor. A thread of brown water curled into the stained basin, then stopped. For several seconds she listened, as if the house might offer an explanation. It offered a drip from somewhere behind her. Evelyn turned. Water had gathered at the corner of the ceiling and was hanging there, fat and yellow in the weak afternoon light. It fell onto the linoleum with a delicate tap. "Well," she said to the empty kitchen, "you're a talkative little thing." The joke sounded like something she would have said for Harold. He would have answered that at least the cottage had waited until Daniel left to begin complaining. Then he would have found a saucepan for the leak and spent 20 minutes making the wrong tool work, rather than walking to the shed for the right one. But Harold had been dead for 73 days, and there was no saucepan in the kitchen. There was hardly anything in the kitchen at all. Daniel had called the cottage furnished. By that he meant it contained a table with 1 short leg, 2 wooden chairs, a chipped enamel stove, and a cupboard holding a mousetrap and 3 cloudy jelly jars. The family house had contained 46 years of furniture until Laura began putting blue painter's tape on the pieces she and Daniel intended to keep. The first strip had appeared on Evelyn's walnut sideboard. "Oh, this doesn't mean anything yet," Laura had said. The second had appeared on Harold's reading chair. The third, on the brass floor lamp Evelyn had rewired herself. By the end of the week, the house looked as though a nervous blue insect had landed on everything worth taking. Evelyn had removed the tape from the old industrial sewing machine. "That isn't going anywhere," she told Laura. Laura had paused with her thumbnail under another strip. Of course not. They both knew Laura had never wanted the machine. It was ugly, heavy, and scarred around the base, where decades of buckles and upholstery tacks had struck it. But Evelyn's refusal had drawn a line, and Laura disliked lines she had not placed herself. Now the machine sat under the leaking porch roof because Daniel had declined to take it through the front door. Evelyn crossed the kitchen and tried the light switch. Nothing happened. She tried again because people did foolish things when the sensible result was inconvenient. From the front room came the muffled vibration of her phone inside her handbag. She expected Daniel checking whether she had found the water problem. The thought arrived so naturally that she hated herself a little for it. The message was from him, but it read, "Made it back. Don't forget the closing packet is in your brown suitcase." Evelyn typed, "There's no water." She watched the tiny word delivered appear. For a while, nothing followed. She put the phone down and went outside. Cold drizzle settled on her chin-length silver hair. She tucked it behind her ears and dragged the lighter suitcase across the porch threshold, then the heavier one. The front door resisted until she lifted it by the knob and shoved with her shoulder. Inside, the air smelled of wet wood, old ashes, and the sweet, dusty remains of mice. The main room was scarcely wider than the front of the house. A stone fireplace occupied the central chimney, with built-in shelves on one side and a narrow passage to the kitchen on the other. An iron radiator stood beneath each front window. Evelyn touched one. Cold. She had asked Daniel that morning whether the heat worked. It was winterized, he had said. That isn't what I asked. The property was Dad's. You know as much about it as I do. She had not. Harold had bought the place 19 years earlier from the estate of an old customer. He talked about fixing it up one day, but one day kept moving. First, Daniel needed help with a down payment. Then Harold's knees failed. Then the roof on their own house needed replacing. The cottage became a place for spare lumber, old tax files, and intentions. In July, while Evelyn was still writing condolence notes, Daniel had arrived at the family house with a folder tucked under his arm. He sat across from her at the dining table where she had repaired his work shirts, addressed his wedding invitations, and once stayed awake until dawn, helping him correct the accounts for his first business. He explained that the house would have to be sold under the arrangement Harold had made years ago. Daniel spoke gently, repeating phrases like shared estate and cleanest option. Evelyn already understood the arrangement. What she had not understood was his hurry. You don't need all this space, he said. I'm still in it. I mean, going forward. Going forward became his favorite direction. Going forward, the listing market was strong. Going forward, the carrying costs made no sense. Going forward, Evelyn would appreciate freedom from maintenance. Laura found a buyer before Evelyn finished clearing Harold's medicine from the bathroom cabinet. The cottage transfer was presented as fairness. The property had belonged solely to Harold, and it could pass cleanly to Evelyn. Daniel would handle the sale of the family house and keep the liquid proceeds according to the existing arrangement. He said the cottage gave her an asset of her own. Then he advised her to sell it. Evelyn had signed because the transfer was valid, because fighting would consume money she did not have, and because every room in the old house had begun to feel like a waiting room where Daniel expected her to leave. She had also signed because of the expression that crossed his face when she asked for the cottage keys. Surprise first, then relief. He believed he had solved her. Her phone vibrated again. Water was shut off last time anyone checked. Valve may be in lean-to. Call somebody if you need help. Evelyn read the message twice. The first sentence meant he had known, not necessarily today, not necessarily how bad it was, but he had known enough to answer. She typed, "Who?" 3 dots appeared, vanished, then returned. "A plumber, Mom." The drizzle thickened. Evelyn stood beneath the porch roof watching drops strike her phone screen. She wanted to call him. Not to ask him to come back, she would have walked barefoot to Massachusetts before giving him that satisfaction, but to make him say plainly that he had left a 68-year-old woman at an unheated house without water on an October evening. Instead, she slipped the phone into the pocket of her moss-green work jacket. The rear lean-to was attached to the kitchen and had to be reached through a swollen door. She pushed until flakes of old paint broke loose beneath her hand. Inside were a rusted lawnmower, empty feed sacks, a stack of warped shutters, and enough cobweb to upholster a sofa. She found the shutoff valve low on the wall behind a crate. It would not turn. Evelyn crouched, braced one scuffed brown boot against the sill, and tried again. Pain moved through her fingers into her wrists. At 68, she was short and sturdy, not fragile, but strength had become something she had to budget. She stopped before anger made the decision for her. "Fine," she told the valve. "You've unionized." Through the dirty rear window, the detached shed stood to the right of the cottage, its single door hanging slightly crooked. Beyond it, the old apple trees rose over the hill. There were still a few red apples clinging high in the branches, small and stubborn against the gray sky. The light was thinning. She needed drinking water, heat, and something to catch the leak. She had no car. Daniel had sold Harold's sedan with the rest of the estate items, explaining that the repair bills made it impractical. Evelyn had believed she could manage without one until the move was settled. From the cottage, the nearest store might as well have been in Canada. She searched every cupboard. Behind the stove, she found a dented aluminum pot with a loose handle. She set it beneath the kitchen drip, then carried one of the cloudy jelly jars outside and held it beneath the porch runoff. The water smelled of leaves and roofing tar. Not drinking that, she decided. Her phone showed 1 week bar. She searched for plumbers near Brattleboro and wrote 2 numbers on the back of an old envelope, though both businesses were already closed. A third listing claimed 24-hour service. The man who answered sounded half asleep and told her the emergency call-out alone would be $200. What would the non-emergency call-out cost tomorrow? $110, assuming you're in our area. I'm suddenly much less thirsty. He laughed once. It was not unkind, but he did not lower the price. Evelyn thanked him and hung up. She opened her brown suitcase on the front room floor. Beneath a pair of dark trousers and Harold's folded cream knit sweater lay the closing packet, exactly where Daniel said it would be. The deed was ordinary. Her name was correctly spelled. No trap waited in the fine print, no secret condition that would turn the cottage into gold or give it back to Daniel. It was simply hers, including the bad valve, the cold radiators, and whatever was dripping inside the kitchen ceiling. At the bottom of the suitcase, she found 2 bottles of water she had packed for the drive. She laughed then, one sharp sound that surprised her. Harold used to tease her for carrying water everywhere, as though they might be stranded crossing a desert between Vermont towns. Preparedness is not a character flaw, she had always told him. She drank half a bottle, screwed the cap back on, and made herself stop. Night pressed against the 2 front windows. Evelyn found a box of matches on the mantel and knelt at the fireplace, but the old ashes smelled damp, and she could not be certain the chimney was clear. She left it alone. Safe limits, Harold used to call such choices, usually after ignoring one himself. She pulled on the cream sweater beneath her work jacket, wrapped a blanket around her legs, and sat on the less wobbly kitchen chair. The sewing machine remained outside, covered with the plastic Daniel had thrown over it. Her phone did not ring. At 7, Laura sent a photograph of the walnut sideboard positioned beneath a bright mirror in their dining room. "Fits perfectly," the message said, followed by a heart. Evelyn studied the picture until the kitchen drip struck the pot again. Tap. She set the phone face down. Tap. The cottage shifted in the wind, old boards rubbing inside old walls. Tap. Evelyn lowered her head, and the tears came without drama. She cried for Harold, for the house already rearranged without her, and for the son who had made abandonment sound like generosity. What hurt most was not that Daniel believed she would fail here. It was how carefully he had prepared to be right. She let herself cry until the pot filled enough to change the sound of the drip. Then she wiped her face with both hands, carried the pot to the sink, and started again. That became the night's rhythm. Catch the leak, empty the pot, check the plastic over the sewing machine, sit beneath the blanket until the cold found a new way through it. At 9, she discovered the downstairs bedroom smelled strongly of mildew. At 10, she found a second blanket in a cedar chest, along with 3 moths and a 1987 seed catalog. At 11, the wind pushed rain beneath the front door, so she rolled up one of her bath towels and wedged it against the threshold. The towel had been part of a matching set. Laura had taken the others. Around midnight, Evelyn's phone dropped to 12%. She turned it off. The cottage became completely dark. She slept in brief pieces on a narrow bed, with her jacket buttoned to the throat. Once she woke convinced Harold was moving around in the kitchen. The house gave a long wooden groan, and she almost called his name. By dawn, the rain had stopped. Gray light reached through the bedroom curtains and showed Evelyn exactly how little sleep had improved anything. Her breath clouded faintly above the blanket. One hip ached from the mattress. Her silver hair had flattened on one side and risen straight up on the other. She found a small mirror hanging above the dresser. "You look dangerous," she told herself. Someone knocked on the front door. Not Daniel. He would have called from the car. Evelyn pulled on her boots and crossed the front room, stepping over a soft place near the wall. When she opened the door, a woman stood on the porch, holding a stainless steel thermos in one hand and a red toolbox in the other. She was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in an orange rain shell that could have guided ships through fog. Damp gray hair escaped from beneath a knitted cap. Mud covered her boots to the ankles. "You Evelyn Mercer." "Depends. On what? Whether you're here to sell me something." The woman considered this. "Coffee." Evelyn looked at the thermos. "How much?" Conversation. "That's expensive." "Usually is." The woman held out the thermos. "Ruth Calder, orchard next door." Evelyn stepped aside. Ruth entered without making a performance of noticing the cold. Her gaze moved once around the front room, taking in the stained ceiling, bare floor, and blankets piled on the chair. She set the toolbox down beside the fireplace. "I saw Daniel's car yesterday," she said. "You know Daniel. I know the car. He came through in August with a real estate man. They stood in the lane for 11 minutes and never unlocked the door." Evelyn paused with the thermos cap in her hand. A real estate man? Had his company name on his jacket? Could have been here to discuss ballroom lessons. Evelyn poured coffee into the cap. It was hot and strong enough to make her eyes water. She drank too quickly. Ruth looked toward the kitchen. Water on? No. Power? Possibly shy. Heat? Deeply theoretical. Ruth nodded as though Evelyn had given her an orchard report. "Let's take them in order." The red toolbox contained an adjustable wrench, 2 screwdrivers, electrical tape, work gloves, and a quantity of bent nails that appeared to have no purpose. In the lean-to, Ruth crouched beside the valve and put one hand on it. "Don't force that," Evelyn said. "It's seized." "Good. You already learned the first rule. What's the second? Don't let a neighbor with a wrench feel important." Ruth tested the valve gently, then followed the pipe with her flashlight. "Supply comes up through the floor here. Could be shut at the well. Could be drained. Could be both." Daniel said the valve might be in here. Daniel says things in a tone that makes people mistake them for information. Evelyn looked at her. Ruth kept examining the pipe. "He came by after Harold died. Asked me whether the orchard ever needed extra acreage. I told him I already had all the grass I could afford not to mow. He was trying to sell it. He was trying to learn whether he could." The distinction made something tighten beneath Evelyn's ribs. Daniel had brought her a folder in July. He had arranged the cottage transfer as her fair share. In August, while she sorted Harold's clothes and argued with Laura over dishes, Daniel had already been measuring how quickly the property might leave her hands. Ruth stood and brushed dirt from her knees. "I've got a frost-free hydrant in the lower orchard, about 200 yards uphill. You can fill containers there until this is sorted. I can pay you. For water. For the inconvenience. The water won't notice." Ruth picked up her toolbox. "If you want to balance the scales, you can look at the seat in my truck sometime. Spring's coming through the fabric and introducing itself. I'm an upholstery seamstress, not a magician. Shame. I need both." Outside, the valley was still half hidden by mist. The wet grass darkened Evelyn's trouser cuffs as she followed Ruth around the right side of the cottage. Up close, the detached shed looked better than it had from the lean-to window. The door sagged, but the roof line was mostly straight. One small pane was cracked. Rust had bloomed around the hinges. Ruth glanced toward it. "Harold talked about making that your workshop." The word stopped Evelyn beside the shed. "He told you?" "Years ago. He came out some Sundays. Mostly moved lumber from one damp place to another. Nice man. Terrible planner." Evelyn nearly smiled. He believed buying materials counted as progress. He also believed measuring once was plenty. That was optimism. He called it confidence. They continued uphill between the apple trees. Ruth's orchard was old enough that the trunks twisted like worked hands. Most of the fruit had been picked, but bruised apples lay in the wet leaves, giving off a sweet, fermented smell. Ruth walked steadily without hurrying Evelyn. That small courtesy was so exact that Evelyn noticed it. The hydrant stood near a weathered equipment barn. Ruth showed her how to lift the handle fully so the line would drain below the frost level. Beside it, she had already placed 2 clean 5-gallon containers. "You knew I had no water," Evelyn said. "I suspected." "How?" "No lights. No chimney smoke. You went outside with a jelly jar after dark. Evelyn closed her eyes briefly. You saw that? I did. I was assessing the rainwater, very scientific. It failed. Ruth filled both containers, but when she lifted one, Evelyn took the other. I can carry it, Evelyn said. I can see that. The walk downhill proved the difference between being able to carry something and enjoying it. Water shifted inside the container with each step, pulling at Evelyn's shoulder. Halfway to the cottage, Ruth stopped without comment and switched hands. Evelyn did the same. At the porch, they found the plastic had blown partly off the sewing machine. Evelyn set down the water so quickly it sloshed over her boot. Oh no. The machine's black metal head was beaded with moisture. She stripped away the plastic and ran her fingers beneath the balance wheel. Damp, but not soaked. The wooden work surface had caught most of the rain. Ruth took one end of the machine table. Where do you want it? It's heavy. I've met heavy things. Together they wrestled it through the front door. The legs caught on the raised threshold. The machine tilted toward Ruth, who gave a grunt and shoved it upright with her hip. You all right? Evelyn asked. My dignity cracked, but nothing structural. They positioned it by the left front window where the light was strongest. Evelyn wiped the metal dry with the towel from beneath the door. Ruth studied the wiring near the base. Wouldn't plug that in yet. If I had electricity, I'd be tempted. Breaker panel? They found it in the rear lean-to, behind the warped shutters. The main breaker was off. 2 circuit labels had faded beyond recognition, and one had been marked kitchen in Harold's handwriting. Evelyn recognized the question mark. Harold had labeled most things as if inviting future debate. Ruth did not touch the main. You need someone who knows what they're looking at. I need several someones, apparently. I know a contractor, Mateo Ruiz, carpenter, but he handles old houses and brings in licensed people when a job needs them. Does he answer his phone? For me? Eventually. For someone new? Depends how charming you are. I've been told I look dangerous. That might be better. Ruth called from the porch, where the signal was strongest. She left a message that omitted urgency, but included the phrases 68, no water, and Daniel Mercer, each delivered with suspicious precision. You didn't have to mention my age. It saved time. It also made me sound abandoned. Ruth put the phone in her pocket. Were you? Evelyn bent to adjust the towel around the sewing machine's wooden table. The question was not soft, which made it harder to evade. My son transferred the cottage to me. Legally. He didn't put me out on the road. No, he put you at the end of one. Evelyn straightened. I accepted it. I didn't say you didn't. That was the first moment Evelyn understood Ruth might be capable of kindness without making it comfortable. Before leaving, Ruth poured the remaining coffee into a jelly jar and set the thermos cap over it to keep out dust. She also wrote Mateo's number on the seed catalog. I'll return the containers clean, Evelyn said. Keep them until your water's fixed. And the coffee? You can return that internally. At the door, Ruth nodded toward the orchard. Lower rows are mine. Cottage land starts at the old stone line. The hydrant is on my side, so don't trip around convincing yourself you're trespassing. I wasn't going to. You have the face of a woman who would rather dehydrate than owe somebody a quart. Evelyn almost objected, then looked at the 2 full containers. Only if it was a poorly documented quart, she said. Ruth laughed, a rough, warm sound, and walked back toward the trees. Alone again, Evelyn washed the jelly jars and filled the enamel stove's kettle. She still had no safe way to heat it, but the simple weight of water in the kitchen changed the room. It gave her something to measure. Her phone rang just after 9. Daniel's name filled the screen. Evelyn let it ring 4 times before answering. Morning, he said brightly. How'd you sleep? Cold. There was a pause. Well, it's an old place. The water was shut off. I told you where the valve was. It's seized, and the main may be off at the well. Another pause, shorter this time. So call somebody. I have. Good. See? You're handling it. The approval in his voice was almost worse than indifference. Daniel, why did you bring a real estate agent out here in August? Silence moved onto the line. Then he exhaled. Ruth Calder came over, didn't she? She brought water. That woman likes getting involved. She noticed there was no chimney smoke. I was only trying to understand the property's options. You weren't even sure you wanted it then. You hadn't offered it to me then. Mom, I'm not doing this at 9 in the morning. No, you did it in August. His voice hardened around the edges. I have a meeting. Get an estimate before you authorize anything major. There's no sense pouring money into a worthless structure. The word worthless settled differently now, not as an opinion, as a plan. After he hung up, Evelyn stood by the front window looking at the gravel lane. Ruth's orange rain shell flickered between the orchard trees and disappeared. On the sewing table lay her expense notebook, a pencil, and the closing packet. Evelyn opened the notebook to the first clean page. Water containers, she wrote. Borrowed. Below that, she added, contractor inspection. Cost unknown. She hesitated, then wrote one more line. Make it safe before winter. The words did not look brave. They looked expensive. Outside, a pickup turned onto the gravel lane, moving slowly through the wet leaves. It stopped beside Daniel's tire tracks, and a man in a brown canvas coat climbed out. He looked at the roof before he looked at Evelyn. That, more than anything, made her hope he was Mateo Ruiz. The man crossed the lane without knocking the mud from his boots against the tires. He carried no toolbox, only a flashlight and a yellow legal pad folded lengthwise into the back pocket of his jeans. "You Evelyn," he called. "If you're Mateo, that's what my truck says." The lettering on the door read, Ruiz Repair Carpentry beneath a phone number and a faded green outline of a house. Evelyn stepped onto the porch. "Ruth called you 8 minutes ago. She called me 3 times before that. First time, she said a woman was moving into Harold Mercer's cottage. Second time, she said the woman had no water. Third time, she said if I didn't answer, she'd come find me." "I'm sorry. Why? You didn't call me 3 times. Mateo Ruiz was 51, perhaps, with a close-cropped beard graying along the jaw and the careful movements of a man who had learned what one bad twist could cost. He stood in the lane and studied the cottage from chimney to foundation. His eyes paused at the porch roof. "Don't stand under the left corner when there's snow on it," he said. Evelyn looked up. "Good morning to you, too." That was good morning. He walked to the end of the porch and pressed a post with the heel of his hand. The post shifted nearly half an inch. Is the whole thing going to fall? Eventually, everything falls. Question is whether it waits for us to move. She could not tell if he was joking. His expression suggested he did not care whether she could. Mateo went back to his truck for a tool bag and a folding ladder. He put disposable covers over his boots before entering the cottage, though the floor was already dirtier than his soles. "Ruth said you're staying here. I stayed here last night. That wasn't my question. It sounded like one." He glanced at her, then opened the breaker panel in the lean-to. "You two are going to get along. We've met for 45 minutes. That's enough for Ruth. She usually decides in 7. Mateo shone his flashlight over the wiring without touching anything. The panel had a row of old breakers, 2 newer replacements, and a tangle of pencil marks on the door. "Kitchen" remained the clearest label. "Main's off," he said. "Do you know when the service was last active?" "No." "Any inspection papers?" "No." "Did Harold keep records?" Harold kept every receipt he ever received in 3 places he could never remember. That's not records. That's weather. He opened the lower compartment, then closed it again. "I'm not energizing this until I test the branch circuits. Some of this is newer. Some of it was installed when people thought electricity was a hobby. Can you do that? I hold an electrical contractor license. I'm also going to tell you when I want another pair of hands. Anyone who says he does every trade alone is lying or dangerous." He wrote on the legal pad, tore off the top sheet, and handed it to her. "Electric. Inspect before service," it said. "That's very thorough," Evelyn said. "It gets worse." He started in the front room and moved slowly through the house. Evelyn followed until he stopped beneath the stained ceiling. "You don't have to follow me. It's my house. Then you're allowed to stand anywhere I'm not opening something over your head." He climbed the ladder and pressed the plaster around the stain. The surface was damp near the outside edge, but firm toward the chimney. "Roof leak?" she asked. "Most likely flashing where the porch roof meets the wall. Maybe above it, too. I'll look from outside. Can it be patched? Everything can be patched? Some things should be. That sounds expensive." It was free. The answer costs money. Mateo inspected the bedroom floor joists through an access panel in the closet. He crawled under the kitchen lean-to while Evelyn stood outside, listening to his flashlight knock against pipes. When he emerged, cobwebs striped one shoulder of his coat. "The main supply was drained," he said. "That's good. The shutoff in the lean-to is bad. That's ordinary. The pipe under the kitchen has enough pitch to drain, which might mean Harold listened to somebody once. He occasionally rested between mistakes." Mateo's mouth moved at one corner. "I'm going to open the well valve slowly and see if the pump holds pressure. You watch under the sink. If I yell, 'Close the valve,' I show you. Don't touch anything else." "You think I'll flood the house?" "I think everybody floods a house eventually. We're trying not to make today your turn." At the small concrete well cover beyond the rear, lean-to, he opened a weatherproof box and checked it with a meter. He made 3 trips between the well, the pressure tank, and his truck before connecting a portable power source to test the pump independently of the cottage wiring. A deep mechanical hum started beneath the ground. Evelyn hurried to the kitchen. The pipe beneath the sink trembled. Air spat from the faucet, followed by a rush of brown water that struck the basin hard enough to splash her sweater. "It's coming," she called. Something hissed behind the stove. "Turn it off," Mateo shouted. Evelyn ran to the lean-to, gripped the valve Mateo had marked with blue tape, and pulled. It resisted, then moved. The hum stopped. In the kitchen, water spread from behind the stove in a shallow fan. Mateo appeared with a bucket and 2 rags. "Split supply line." I thought it was drained. Mostly drained. The words could have been a description of the entire cottage. They soaked up the water together. Mateo moved the stove far enough to reveal a copper pipe with a narrow split in it. Green corrosion crusted an older fitting. "Can you fix it?" "Yes." "Not with what's on my truck." "How much?" "Let me finish looking before I invent numbers." He inspected the furnace next. The oil tank held a little under a quarter tank, but the service tag was 4 years old. He refused to start it until the burner and flue had been checked. Evelyn felt each unlit object becoming a line in her notebook. On the roof, he moved with slow confidence, probing shingles and taking photographs with his phone. Evelyn stood below despite his instruction not to, stepping backward until she could see the steep main roof, the central brick chimney, and his boots near the damaged flashing. "Most of the roof's older, but it's not gone," he called down. "West section needs shingles before snow. Chimney flashing needs replacement. Porch roof needs framing repair, not just roofing. Is the frame sound? House frame? I'll tell you when I'm down. That isn't comforting. It isn't supposed to be. It's supposed to be accurate." He climbed down and folded the ladder. Then he examined the clapboards. Foundation, rear lean-to, and detached shed. At the shed, he pushed the door upward before opening it so the lower corner would clear the ground. Inside were 3 stacks of lumber, a workbench without a vise, broken garden tools, and a nest made from shredded insulation. The roof had leaked near the back wall, but daylight did not show through anywhere. "Harold wanted this to be my workroom," Evelyn said. Mateo pressed a screwdriver into the sill. "Could be. Not now." "No." He looked toward the cottage. "First you keep water out from above. Then you make the electrical safe. Then heat and plumbing. Shed can wait. That order? Roof before snow. Electric before you live on extension cords. Furnace service before you freeze. Plumbing before Ruth starts charging you by the gallon. She said she wouldn't. That's how she traps you." Evelyn folded her arms against the cold. "You haven't answered about the house frame." Mateo put the screwdriver away. "Frame is sound. Foundation has settlement at the rear corner, but it's old and doesn't look active. Floor needs repair near the front wall. Lean-to sill has rot. Porch post needs shoring. None of that says tear it down. The relief arrived so sharply that Evelyn had to disguise it as a question. So Daniel was wrong. I don't know Daniel. He said the structure was worthless. Worth and condition are different questions. Mateo closed the shed door. Condition, I can inspect. They returned to the kitchen table, where he divided a page into 3 columns. Red was immediate. Yellow was before deep winter. Green was work Evelyn could postpone or do herself. The red column included repairing the split line, replacing the seized valve, inspecting the electrical circuits, servicing the furnace, shoring the porch post, and stopping the active leak. The west roof section went under yellow, though Mateo circled it twice. What can I do? Evelyn asked. Today? In general. He studied her hands. They were broad and marked from years of needles, tack pullers, and fabric shears. Evelyn resisted the urge to hide them. You can clear brush away from the foundation, remove loose wallpaper if you wear a mask, wash walls, patch small plaster cracks after the leaks are stopped, scrape paint from ground level. Not from a ladder. I can use a ladder. Everybody can use one on the way up. I'm not made of glass. No. Glass is light. She stared at him. Mateo placed a finger on the red column. I don't know you, Mrs. Mercer. I'm not insulting your ability. I'm telling you where a fall turns an expensive house into the least important problem you have. Evelyn. All right, Evelyn, how long to price this? I can give you rough numbers now. Written estimate tomorrow. He began with the water repair. $400 to $600, depending on what failed when the line held pressure. Furnace service might be $200, unless parts were needed. Electrical inspection and urgent corrections could range from $900 to several thousand. The porch stabilization and flashing repair would be another $1,500 to $2,500. The west roof section, if the decking underneath remained solid, perhaps $4,000. Evelyn wrote every figure in her school notebook. Her pension deposit was $1,842 a month after deductions. The family house proceeds did not belong to her. She had $23,600 in savings, accumulated slowly from sewing work, and the portion of household money Harold never objected to her setting aside. It had once felt like security. On the page, it became subtraction. If the electric is at the high end, she said, and the roof decking is bad, I can't do all of it now. Then we stage it. Snow won't stage itself. No, but I can tarp the west section correctly, repair the active flashing, and schedule the shingles before heavy weather. Temporary isn't the same as careless. How much to make tonight different from last night? Mateo looked around the cold kitchen. Waterline if I get the parts. Electrical testing. Furnace service company can come this afternoon if I make an unpleasant phone call. Porch sure. You'd still have a roof problem, but you'd have water, safe power, and maybe heat. Maybe. I don't promise for machines I haven't opened. Evelyn took out the checkbook she had carried in her handbag. Deposit? Not until you see the estimate. I'm asking you to work today. I'll bill today's service and materials. Bigger work gets a deposit after you sign. The absence of pressure made her more willing to trust him than reassurance would have. Mateo drove into town for parts. While he was gone, Evelyn carried one borrowed container into the kitchen and returned the other to the porch. She opened her notebook again and wrote the numbers beneath. Make it safe before winter. The phone rang while she was calculating how many months of groceries $4,000 represented. A woman introduced herself as Marjorie Bell from West Brattleboro. Ruth Calder says you do upholstery, she said. I have 6 dining chairs that have been scratching people since Easter. Evelyn looked at the silent sewing machine by the window. I do, she said. Could you take a look? The cottage was cold, the power uncertain, and her tools were still packed beneath 2 dresses and Harold's sweater. She could hear Mateo's warning, Daniel's certainty, and the dry little scratch of her pencil against the expense page. Yes, Evelyn said. I believe I could. Mateo returned while Evelyn was still discussing fabric with Marjorie Bell. No, not silk, Evelyn said. Not unless you plan to serve dinner standing up. Marjorie laughed. My husband found a blue silk remnant at an estate sale. Then make him a necktie. Mateo came through the lean-to carrying copper fittings and a length of pipe. He lifted his eyebrows at the sound of Evelyn's business voice, but did not interrupt. "Bring me one chair first," Evelyn told Marjorie. "I'll open the seat and see what's under there. If the frames are loose, that's a separate repair." Ruth said you'd be honest. Ruth has known me since breakfast. She sounded certain. She generally does. They agreed Marjorie would bring a chair the next morning. Evelyn ended the call and found Mateo kneeling behind the stove. "You work fast," he said. "I answered a telephone." For most businesses, that's the hard part. He shut off the test supply and cut away the split section of copper. The failure had occurred where an old coupling trapped just enough water to freeze. He showed Evelyn the green staining and the slight swelling in the pipe. This is what a hidden split looks like before it becomes a ruined floor. It wasn't hidden once water came out. That's the advanced diagnostic method. He replaced the line, installed a new shutoff in the lean-to, and tested the system in stages. This time, the pump built pressure without a hiss from behind the stove. Brown water ran from the kitchen faucet, then pale yellow, then clear. Evelyn stood with her fingers beneath the stream. "You should still have it tested," Mateo said. "Well, hasn't been used regularly. I won't drink it yet. Washing is fine. Let it run 10 minutes first." She turned the tap off after 9. Listening to water disappear down the drain felt extravagant. Mateo set up 2 work lights and began testing the cottage circuits. One bedroom outlet had reversed polarity. A kitchen receptacle showed heat damage. In the front room, mice had chewed the insulation on a wire where it entered the basement crawlspace. "Can you repair it today?" Evelyn asked. "I can isolate the bad sections, replace these outlets, and give you safe power in the front room, bedroom, and part of the kitchen. The rest stays off until I rewire the lean-to circuit." "How long?" "Half a day if the house stops introducing itself." It did not. Behind the kitchen receptacle, he found a junction wrapped in brittle cloth tape. The front light fixture had been connected with mismatched wire nuts. When he removed a metal cover near the baseboard, a dozen acorns rolled onto the floor. Mateo watched them scatter. "Electrician?" Evelyn asked. "Squirrel. Licensed?" "Hard to verify." He worked until the afternoon light weakened. Evelyn scrubbed the inside of the cupboards with water heated in an electric kettle, plugged into his temporary power box. She washed mouse droppings from the shelves, threw out the old trap, and lined one drawer with pages from the seed catalog. The 1987 prices were almost cruel. Tomato seeds had cost 85 cents. A white service van arrived shortly before 3. The furnace technician, a narrow man named Paul who apologized each time he set down a tool, opened the burner and made a low sound. "What does that sound cost?" Evelyn asked. "Could just be a nozzle. Your voice says otherwise." "My voice always sounds worried. My wife says I order lunch like there's been an accident. The nozzle was clogged, the filter nearly black, and the ignition electrodes worn. The flue drew properly and the heat exchanger showed no visible crack." Paul replaced what was necessary, vacuumed the burner, and restarted the system while Evelyn stood beside the basement door. The furnace coughed once, twice, then caught with a steady mechanical roar. Warmth did not arrive immediately. First came the smell of heated dust. Then the radiator beneath the left front window clicked deep inside and began to lose its chill. Evelyn put her palm against the metal. Paul wrote a total of $386 on the invoice. The figure injured the moment but did not erase it. "Have the chimney cleaned before you use the fireplace," he said. "Furnace flue is separate and looks all right. I wasn't planning a fire." "Good. People celebrate working heat by creating unrelated emergencies." After Paul left, Mateo replaced the last damaged outlet and turned on the safe circuits. The front room ceiling light glowed weakly through a glass shade browned by dust. Evelyn looked up at it. "You can have a brighter bulb," Mateo said. "It's bright enough to count." He followed her gaze, and his face softened for only a moment. Then he pointed to the sewing machine. "Don't plug that in, I haven't. The motor cord's cracked near the pedal. I saw. I can replace it. I can replace a cord. Have you? On lamps. Same principle, different load. Show me how you'd do it. The request was not mocking. Mateo placed a new cord and plug on the sewing table, then stood back. Evelyn opened the motor housing, photographed the wire positions with her phone, and checked the strain relief. Her fingers knew small work. They did not tremble. Mateo watched her strip the insulation to the correct length. "You've done more than lamps," he said. "I worked in a furniture shop for 19 years. The owner believed women could repair anything as long as he didn't have to pay us extra for it." Mateo handed her a crimping tool. "Use this. Your pliers will damage the connector." That was the way he taught. No speech, only the proper tool at the exact moment pride might choose the wrong one. When the new cord was secured, he tested it. Evelyn plugged in the machine and pressed the knee control. The motor hummed. The needle descended once into empty air. She stopped it immediately. "That's enough," she said. Mateo looked at the bare room and the machine positioned before the wet front window. "For what?" "To prove it still knows me." He packed his tools without answering. Before leaving, he braced the porch post with temporary lumber and covered the vulnerable west roof section with a heavy tarp fixed beneath the shingle edges, not weighted with loose bricks, as Harold once would have done. His invoice for the day came to $1,092, including the plumbing materials, electrical repairs, emergency flashing patch, and labor. Evelyn wrote the check slowly. Mateo took it without pretending the amount was small. "I'll bring the full estimate tomorrow." "Do that. Roof work needs a deposit." "I understand. I'm saying it because people sometimes hear staged and think free until spring. I have never confused staged with free." "No," he said. "I don't think you have." The furnace held the cottage at 62 degrees that night. Evelyn raised the thermostat to 64, then lowered it again after calculating the remaining oil. She bathed at the kitchen sink, washed her hair, and heated a can of soup on the enamel stove after Mateo checked the connection. The meal tasted of salt and relief. She slept for 6 uninterrupted hours. Marjorie Bell arrived at 9 the next morning in a station wagon with one dining chair lying on its side in the back. She was in her early 60s, brisk and silver-haired, with red-framed glasses and a scarf patterned with yellow birds. "I brought the worst one," she said. "That's what people always say before bringing me the second worst one." They carried it into the front room. The chair was maple, well-made, and loose at one rear joint. Its seat had been covered in brown vinyl attached with hardware store staples, several of which had worked upward through the surface. "My husband did that," Marjorie said. "He was enthusiastic. He watched a video. That can be dangerous." Evelyn turned the chair over. Beneath the vinyl, the old webbing had failed, and a slab of disintegrating foam shed yellow powder onto the floor. The frame needed red-gluing, but there was no split wood. 6 chairs? Evelyn asked. 6 opportunities to stab a dinner guest. Evelyn priced the labor, webbing, padding, and a durable fabric. She quoted $780 for all 6, with half due for materials and the balance on completion. Marjorie did not bargain. That unsettled Evelyn more than bargaining would have. "How long?" she asked. 10 days after I have the fabric. Ruth thought you might need them one at a time because of space." Evelyn looked around the front room. The sewing machine occupied one window. Her suitcases sat against the bedroom wall. A clean chair could wait in the lean-to, but damp made it unsuitable for fabric. 2 at a time, she said. "I can manage that." Marjorie wrote a check for the deposit and then wandered toward the kitchen while Evelyn made a receipt. "This place has good bones," she said, "so I've been told. My aunt had cabinets like these, never closed unless you kicked them. They're period accurate." At the porch, Marjorie pointed to the damaged roof. "You fix in all that, in order of how aggressively it threatens me. That's how we renovated our marriage." After the station wagon left, Evelyn placed the deposit check beside Mateo's invoice. $390 coming in. More than 1,400 gone in 2 days, counting the furnace. Not profit yet, she reminded herself. The check belonged partly to fabric, webbing, foam, and glue. A horn sounded from the lane. Daniel's sedan stopped in front of the cottage. He got out wearing a navy wool coat, carrying 2 grocery bags and a small electric space heater still in its box. For one foolish second, Evelyn was glad to see him. Then he noticed Mateo's bracing beneath the porch and the tarp secured along the roof. "What happened here?" he asked. "The house needed work." Daniel set the groceries on the hood of his car. "You hired someone already?" "I hired someone yesterday." "Without talking to me?" The gladness vanished so cleanly it embarrassed her. "I didn't know the water required committee approval," she said. "That's not what I mean. Contractors see an older woman alone and start finding problems. An older woman found the first problem. It was dripping into a pot." Daniel climbed onto the porch and pressed the new brace as if testing evidence. "How much have you spent?" "Good morning, Daniel." "Mom." The word carried warning now, a son's voice laid over the memory of a boy who once came to her with every torn pocket and broken zipper. Evelyn opened the front door. Warm air touched her back. "If you brought groceries, thank you," she said. "If you came to inspect my decisions, make an appointment." He stared past her at the lit front room, the clean counter, and Marjorie's chair beside the sewing machine. "What's that?" "Work. You're taking in furniture here?" "One chair has not yet overwhelmed the county. This is exactly what I was afraid of. You throwing money into the property, trying to prove something." Evelyn looked at the space heater on the car hood. "What did you think I should do when you left me without heat?" "I didn't know the furnace was off. You didn't check." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I'm trying to help now." "No, you're trying to arrive after the danger and supervise the bill." For a moment, neither spoke. Wet branches clicked together in the orchard. Then Daniel picked up the grocery bags. "At least let me bring these in." Evelyn moved aside. He carried them to the kitchen and unpacked canned soup, bread, eggs, coffee, apples, and a package of cookies she'd never liked. The ordinary care of it was almost unbearable. Daniel opened the refrigerator and found it running, so the electric works, in 3 rooms. "And water?" "Yes." He nodded, taking credit for nothing and somehow behaving as though a crisis had been resolved according to his expectations. At the sewing table, his eyes fell on Marjorie's deposit check. "You really charged someone to bring that old chair here?" "She charged herself. That's usually how payment works." His mouth tightened again, but this time he looked uncertain. On the porch, he left the space heater beside the door. "Don't spend much more until you see what the roof costs," he said. Evelyn held his gaze. "I already know what the roof costs." Daniel's face changed, not concern. Not yet. It was the first flicker of recognition that while he had been waiting for her to call, she had begun without him. Daniel looked from Evelyn to the notebook open on the sewing table. "How much?" he asked. "The written estimate isn't here yet. But you said you know, enough to know the roof is repairable." "That isn't what I asked." Evelyn walked into the kitchen and put the bread in the cupboard. Daniel had bought the seeded kind Harold liked. She could not tell whether he remembered that she preferred plain or had never known. "The west section may be 4,000, she said. "The porch and flashing are separate. The electric still needs work." Daniel gave a short laugh with no amusement in it. "So you could be 10,000 in before you even make it livable. I lived here last night. You endured one night. That's different." "Yes," Evelyn said. It was. He heard the edge in her voice and looked away. His attention settled on the patched copper pipe behind the stove, then on the clean water glasses upside down beside the sink. "I can call the agent who came out in August," he said. "He thought the land would appeal to somebody wanting an orchard view. Did you tell him it was going to be mine?" "We were discussing possibilities. For property you didn't own, for property the family needed to make a decision about. Harold owned it. Now I do. That seems like 2 decisions." Daniel rubbed the bridge of his nose. I'm not trying to take anything from you. Evelyn thought of the blue painter's tape, the walnut sideboard beneath Laura's mirror, and the old reading chair that now sat in Daniel's den. He had not stolen those things. Every transfer had been explained, organized, and made to sound reasonable. That was what made the loss so difficult to point at. You don't have to take it, she said. You only have to keep telling me it isn't worth holding. A truck door closed outside. Mateo stepped onto the porch with a folder in one hand and stopped when he saw Daniel. His gaze moved to the dark sedan, then back to the man standing in Evelyn's kitchen. Morning, he said. Daniel turned. You're the contractor? Mateo Ruiz, Daniel Mercer, Evelyn's son. Mateo shook his hand. I guessed one of those. I'd like to see what work you're proposing. Mateo glanced at Evelyn. He did not make the glance theatrical. That's up to the owner. Daniel's shoulders stiffened beneath his wool coat. Evelyn held out her hand for the folder. You can stay while I read it. The estimate was itemized more carefully than she expected. Roof and chimney flashing, $4,260. Porch stabilization and framing repair, $1,800. Remaining electrical corrections, including the lean-to circuit, $1,470. The rotted rear sill was listed separately as work that could wait until spring if monitored. Materials, labor, disposal, permits where required, each had its line. At the bottom, Mateo had written 3 possible schedules. Daniel leaned over her shoulder. $4,000 for part of a roof? Steep pitch, Mateo said. 2 layers to remove. Chimney flashing is custom bent. Decking allowance covers up to 3 sheets if we find rot. And if you don't, she doesn't pay for decking we don't use. I can get other estimates, Daniel said to Evelyn. You can, she replied. For your own roof. His face reddened. I'm trying to make sure you don't get taken advantage of. Mateo closed his tool bag without opening it. Mr. Mercer, she asked questions about every item. She knows what has to happen now and what can wait. If she wants another bid, she should get one. The calm agreement deprived Daniel of an opponent. Evelyn studied the total. She could authorize the roof and remaining electrical work now. The porch was braced and could wait several weeks, though not through heavy snow. Paying for all 3 would take more than $7,000, nearly a third of her savings after the first repairs and furnace service. What if we do the roof and electric, she asked. Then the porch next month if I have the income? Mateo nodded. That's reasonable. I can leave the brace and add a second one before snow. Daniel stared at her. What income? The chair you keep insulting has 5 relatives. Upholstery isn't going to pay for a house. It paid part of yours. The words landed before Evelyn could soften them. Daniel went still. When he and Laura bought their first home, the bank had approved less than they needed. Harold had given them most of the difference, but Evelyn's upholstery earnings had covered the final $6,000. She had worked evenings for nearly 4 months, eating sandwiches beside the machine, because there was no time to stop for dinner. Daniel had thanked both his parents. Over the years, the story changed into one about his father helping him get started. I never said your work didn't matter, he said. You stopped saying it did. Mateo shifted toward the porch. I'll give you both a minute. No, Daniel said. I'm leaving. He picked up the empty grocery bags, then seemed to realize taking them would look strange. He set them back on the counter. At the front door, he turned to Evelyn. Laura said you could stay with us while you sort this out. Evelyn pictured their guest room with the narrow brass bed and Laura's exercise equipment lined against one wall. She pictured asking before using the washing machine and hearing Daniel describe the arrangement as temporary to everyone who called. That's kind of her, she said. It's not charity. I didn't say it was. Then come for a week. Get some distance. Think clearly. I am thinking clearly. Daniel opened the door. Cold air pushed into the front room. You're trying to prove I was wrong, he said. Evelyn looked at the repaired cord on her sewing machine, the 3 powered rooms, and the estimate in her hand. You were wrong before I started. He left the space heater. After his sedan disappeared, Matteo remained on the porch, studying a screw on the handrail as though it required his full concentration. "How much did you hear?" Evelyn asked. "Enough to know the groceries weren't free." She laughed despite herself. It came out tired. Matteo showed her where to sign, then explained the deposit and schedule. A weather opening was expected in 5 days. He could have materials delivered before then and finish the main roof section in 2 days if the decking was sound. The electrical work could be done indoors if rain returned. Evelyn wrote a check for $2,200. Her hand paused before she tore it free. Matteo pretended not to notice, which was another kind of noticing. "I want receipts for materials," she said. "You'll get them, and photographs of anything you cover. You'll get those too. If the decking goes over allowance, stop before replacing it." "I will." She handed him the check. "There," she said. "Now we both look dangerous." While Matteo added a second porch brace, Evelyn began dismantling Marjorie's chair. She removed each staple with a tack lifter and dropped it into a jelly jar. The vinyl came away in one stiff brown sheet. Beneath it, the failed foam clung to the wooden seat like old cake. The work settled her. Fabric and furniture made claims that could be tested. A loose joint moved. Rotten webbing tore. Good wood answered when tapped. Nothing asked her to accept neglect as generosity. Ruth arrived near noon carrying a canvas bag and a covered bowl. "I passed Daniel," she said. He waved with one finger. "Which finger?" "The polite one, technically." She set the bowl on the kitchen table. Beef stew, still warm. "I have groceries," Evelyn said. "I brought lunch, not aid." "What's the difference?" "Aid is tax deductible." Ruth inspected the stripped chair seat and picked up the brown vinyl. "Lovely. It has the texture of a restaurant menu. Can it be saved? Should it be?" "Fair point." They ate at the uneven kitchen table after Evelyn folded a scrap of cardboard beneath the short leg. Ruth described the orchard's late harvest, a stubborn hydraulic line on the cider press, and a man from New Hampshire who had complained that one apple in a 40-pound box was asymmetrical. "What did you tell him?" Evelyn asked. "That I'd speak to the tree." Ruth did not ask about Daniel until the bowls were empty. "He brought a heater," Evelyn said. "That's something." "And groceries. That's 2 somethings. He also brought an opinion about every dollar I'm spending." Ruth scraped the last carrot from her bowl. "People like giving help that proves they were right about your need. He isn't a monster." "I didn't say he was. He worries." "Probably." Evelyn looked toward the space heater in its unopened box. "That's what makes it confusing." "No," Ruth said. "That's what makes him family." Marjorie returned with a second chair and 3 fabric samples. Evelyn rejected the loose weave linen immediately, and the pale floral after rubbing it between her fingers. "This one," she said, choosing a tightly woven slate blue fabric with a small cream stripe. "It will wear well, and crumbs won't establish a government." Marjorie approved. Ruth volunteered to collect the roll from the supplier the next time she went into town, saving Evelyn a delivery fee. Evelyn wrote the mileage beside the material cost and insisted on taking it out of the future truck seat repair. "You haven't even seen my truck seat," Ruth said. "I've seen you get out of it carefully. That spring and I have an understanding." By the time the first roof materials arrived, the front room had become a narrow but functional workspace. Evelyn kept stripped frames along the wall, fabric on the table, and tools arranged in an old baking pan. She reglued the loose joints, clamped them overnight, cut new webbing, and stitched the blue covers with seams, straight enough to disappear into the pattern. Working again changed her posture. She forgot to guard her wrists until they hurt, then remembered Matteo's warning about budgeting strength. She stopped every hour, flexed her fingers, and walked once around the cottage. The path was slick with leaves. Each circuit revealed something else that needed attention. Brush against the foundation, peeling paint beneath a window, a loose board at the lean-to step. She wrote them in the green column. On the morning Matteo began the roof, frost silvered the orchard grass. He and another adult roofer carried bundles up ladders, while Evelyn worked below. The tearing away of old shingles sounded violent but measured. Black scraps fell onto tarps spread along the foundation. At noon, Mateo knocked on the front window and motioned her outside. He showed her a photograph on his phone. Beneath the west slope, the decking was dark around the chimney, but solid except for one sheet near the eave. "One sheet," he said, "not 3. How often do you get to deliver good news? Don't ruin it." The saved allowance amounted to $180. Evelyn wrote the figure in her notebook as carefully as every expense. That afternoon, she finished Marjorie's first 2 chairs. The slate blue seats were firm, smooth, and quietly handsome against the cleaned maple frames. She placed them near the window where the fading light found the cream stripe. For the first time since Daniel had driven away, there was something in the cottage that looked complete. Then the phone rang. It was Laura. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said. Daniel came home very upset. Evelyn kept her hand on the back of the finished chair. "I imagine he did. He says you're spending thousands on that cottage." "Yes." Laura lowered her voice into careful concern. "Evelyn, what happens when the money runs out?" Through the window, Mateo fixed new shingles to the roof Daniel had called worthless. Evelyn watched his hammer rise and fall. "Then," she said, "I'll know exactly what I spent it on." Laura was quiet long enough for Evelyn to hear a cupboard close at the other end of the line. "You've always been careful with money," she said. "I'm being careful now." Daniel doesn't see it that way. Daniel believes careful means agreeing with him before he finishes speaking. That isn't fair. No, it's accurate. Outside, a strip of old roofing slid down the tarp with a dry scrape. Mateo caught it on his boot and tossed it into the debris pile. Laura sighed. He feels guilty. The statement surprised Evelyn into silence. "He won't say that," Laura continued, "but he does. He's been short with everyone since yesterday. He should try apologizing. It takes less energy. He thinks you're punishing him. By repairing my roof? By making it look as though he abandoned you somewhere uninhabitable." Evelyn's fingers tightened around the phone. "Did you know there was no water?" Another cupboard closed. Daniel said the place was winterized. "That isn't an answer. I knew it needed work. We both did. We assumed you would have someone inspect it before moving in. You drove away with him. I wasn't in the car. No, you were waiting for him at dinner." Laura's breath caught just slightly. Daniel had told her about the messages during the drive then. Perhaps he had made the evening sound difficult for him. "We were trying to handle a complicated situation," Laura said. "You handled me right out of the house. That house had to be sold. I know. You've both explained it until the words are smooth." Laura's voice cooled. "Then what do you want from us?" It was a sincere question, which made it worse. Evelyn looked at the 2 finished chairs near the window. She wanted Daniel to return to the afternoon he left her, walk through the cottage before handing over the keys, and see what he had chosen not to see. No answer Laura could give would accomplish that. "I want you to stop asking when my money will run out," she said. Laura said goodbye politely. By sunset, the west roof had been stripped, repaired, and covered with underlayment. Mateo secured waterproof sheeting over the unfinished section before leaving. The night wind worried at it, but the fastenings held. The next afternoon, new dark shingles lay in straight courses around the central chimney. Mateo showed Evelyn the custom flashing before it disappeared beneath them, explaining where water would travel and why the old work had failed. "You don't need to teach me every detail," she said. "You ask every detail. That doesn't mean I expect answers. It usually does." When the work was finished, the roof still looked like the same steep roof. No dramatic new line changed the cottage. One side was simply clean and tight, and the chimney no longer seemed to be sinking into a dark stain. Evelyn paid the balance after comparing the invoice to the estimate. 1 sheet of decking, exactly as promised. Unused materials credited. Photographs attached. Harold would have been suspicious of this much organization, she said. Harold paid me once with a check dated 2 years earlier. Was it good? eventually. Mateo returned the following day to finish the lean-to circuit and install proper grounding where the old wiring met the newer panel. When he turned on the last approved breaker, a bare bulb glowed above the rear door. The lean-to looked worse, illuminated. "Can you put darkness back?" Evelyn asked. "Costs extra." Marjorie collected the first 2 dining chairs with her husband Frank, a quiet man whose embarrassment around the former vinyl seats was almost formal. "I had the staple gun already," he explained. "That's how most trouble begins," Evelyn said. He sat in one finished chair and shifted his weight. The new webbing held firm. "Oh," he said. Marjorie folded her arms. "What does "oh" mean? It's comfortable." "You sound betrayed." They paid for the completed pair and left 2 more frames. Before driving away, Marjorie asked whether Evelyn ever worked on armchairs. "Depending on the chair. My friend has a matching pair, good frames, terrible fabric. She was going to buy new, but I told her not before talking to you." The friend, Doreen Walsh, called that evening. She sent photographs of 2 compact club chairs from the 1950s, upholstered in a faded pink damask. Their frames looked solid. The job would require more fabric, new padding at the arms, and careful matching around the curved backs. Evelyn quoted the labor twice before deciding she had not made an error. It was more than Marjorie's 6 seats combined. Doreen agreed without hesitation and selected a charcoal herringbone from the supplier's photographs. The fabric cost $342. Evelyn ordered it with her own money because Doreen's deposit would not clear until the following business day. When the heavy roll arrived, she ran her palm across the weave. Tight, even. Forgiving. Good cloth had a quiet confidence. It did not need shine. The 2 club chairs would not arrive until the following week, so she stored the roll upright in the front room behind the sewing table, away from the radiators. She covered it with clean muslin against dust. Mateo's porch estimate remained clipped inside her notebook, $1,800, assuming the rot did not extend beyond the post base and outer beam. He had reinforced the temporary brace, but advised completing the work before accumulated snow. Evelyn waited for Doreen's deposit to clear, then signed the porch estimate. "You can start after I finish these dining chairs," she told Mateo. "I need the front room clear enough to work. 5 days? 7. The patch is temporary. I know what temporary means." He looked at the fabric roll behind the sewing table. "Move materials away from that wall if the forecast turns." Evelyn intended to. The forecast turned while she was fitting the last slate blue cover over Marjorie's 5th chair. Rain began after dark, hard enough to blur the front windows. The temperature was too warm for snow, but cold enough that the drops struck with weight. Wind moved down the orchard hill and hit the cottage broadside. The repaired main roof made almost no sound beyond the steady drumming of rain. No water appeared around the chimney. Evelyn checked twice, pleased by the absence. At 11, the porch roof gave a metallic crack. She lifted her head from the chair. Another gust pressed against the windows. Something scraped across the clapboards, then slapped back. Evelyn hurried to the front door. The moment she opened it, wind dragged it from her hand. Rain drove beneath the porch in silver sheets. A length of old flashing had pulled loose, where the porch roof met the facade and was striking the wall. Water streamed behind it. Evelyn shut the door and ran to the sewing table. A line of water had already appeared along the upper edge of the front wall. It gathered behind peeling wallpaper, traveled downward, and spilled from the window casing directly onto the covered roll of herringbone. No, no, no. She dragged the roll away. The bottom end was heavy. Water had wickeded beneath the muslin and climbed into the fabric. When she peeled back the wrapping, a dark stain spread through several outer yards. Evelyn carried the roll to the kitchen table and unrolled it as far as the room allowed. The wet section smelled of plaster and old wood. She blotted it with towels, but rusty water had already marked the pale threads. The fabric was not hers to gamble with. Even if it dried without shrinking, the stain would show across one chair. Back. She placed the dented pot beneath the window leak. For the second time, water struck aluminum in the middle of the night. Tap. This time the cottage was warm, the main roof was sound, the lights worked, and the faucet ran clear. Progress had not failed. One deferred repair had simply come due with interest. Knowing that did not make the ruined cloth cheaper. Mateo arrived at first light with a tarp and an extension ladder. Rain still fell, though the wind had weakened. He secured the loose flashing, then examined the wet wall from inside. "Patch pulled out of old wood," he said. "I should have used longer fasteners. You told me it was temporary. It still should have held. Will you charge me to say that again?" "No." He credited the emergency patch from the porch invoice, but explained that the framing repair could no longer wait. Water had reached the outer beam. If another storm froze inside it, the damage would spread. "Do it correctly," Evelyn said. Mateo looked at the opened fabric on the table. "Can that be cleaned?" "Not reliably." "How much?" $342 plus delivery. His expression tightened. "I'll cover it." "No, my patch failed. My fabric was against a wall you told me to clear. I'm not arguing so I can feel noble. I carry insurance for damage, and I'm not filing a claim over a shared mistake that will raise somebody's paperwork by 10 times the loss. Evelyn." "No." He leaned both hands on the table, then split it. She considered that, then shook her head. "Credit me the emergency patch. Repair the porch for the estimate. I'll replace the fabric. You're stubborn." I learned from professionals. The replacement used nearly all the money she had set aside for food and fuel until her pension arrived. She could have taken it from savings, but savings now had assignments: porch, oil, plumbing contingency. So she made a choice that looked foolish from outside and exact from within. She bought rice, dried beans, onions, canned tomatoes, and enough soup to carry her through the week. She did not tell Daniel. She did not tell Doreen. The replacement fabric arrived before the chairs did. Ruth noticed the canned soup lined along the kitchen shelf. "You opening a restaurant?" she asked. "Limited menu. I have potatoes. I have money." I said potatoes. Evelyn looked at her. Ruth shrugged. "They're too small for market, and I'm tired of looking at them. You can mend the canvas apple bags that keep splitting." "How many?" 8. "For potatoes and onions. That's excessive. I'm a reckless negotiator." Evelyn accepted the sack. The ruined herringbone was not entirely useless. After it dried, she cut away the stained lengths and saved the clean sections for arm pads, piping tests, and future repairs. The worst piece she folded into a thick cover for her tools. Nothing became treasure, but not everything had to become waste. The new tool cover made Mateo angry. He found it folded over Evelyn's tack lifter and shears when he arrived to repair the porch. The charcoal herringbone was unmistakable. "You made that from $300 of fabric?" "Only the part with the stain. It's a very expensive rag. It has piping. That makes everything better." "Usually." He removed the porch decking one board at a time. Beneath the left post, the outer beam had softened where years of water entered behind the flashing. The rod extended farther than they hoped, but not beyond the corner. Mateo pushed a screwdriver into the dark wood and showed Evelyn the fibers separating around it. "This section comes out. Joists are good. Sill behind it is dry. How much over?" "Materials? Maybe 200. Labor is inside my allowance if the rest looks like this. You'll write it down? I'm going to carve it into the porch." He set Evelyn to pulling nails from boards, sound enough to reuse. She sat on an overturned bucket in her canvas jacket, braced each board across her knees, and worked the claw beneath the nail heads. The first came out cleanly, the second bent. The third broke beneath the surface. "Don't dig it out," Mateo said from the corner. "I know, you're holding the punch backward. I was testing you. You failed." He took it from her, turned it around, and demonstrated how to drive the broken nail below the surface without splitting the board. Evelyn repeated the motion. "That's one of your green jobs," he said. "Ground level, seated, no electricity. How thrilling." "You want thrilling? I can let you carry the old beam." By noon, the porch had become a skeleton of joists over damp earth. Mateo supported the small roof, cut away the rotten section, and fitted new pressure-treated lumber into the original frame. Evelyn cleaned the salvaged boards and stacked them beneath the right front window. Ruth arrived with 8 split canvas apple bags and a lunch pail. "I see you've improved the entrance," she said. "Now people have to mean it when they visit." Ruth stepped across an exposed joist with the balance of someone who had spent decades climbing equipment. Mateo pointed at her without looking up. "If you fall, I'm leaving you there. That's why I brought lunch." They ate lentil soup from the pail inside the cottage, seated around the uneven table. Evelyn had repaired its short leg with a fitted block of scrap rather than folded cardboard. It no longer rocked. Ruth noticed immediately. "Luxury," she said. "Try not to become spoiled." After lunch, Ruth took the first repaired apple bag and pulled hard at the reinforced seam. Better than new. New was badly stitched. I chose the lowest bidder, and here we are. They agreed the potatoes and onions more than covered the work. Ruth still left a jar of apple butter beside the stove, claiming the lid had sealed crooked and made it unfit for sale. Evelyn inspected it after she left. The seal was perfect. The replacement herringbone arrived clean. Evelyn stored it on 2 chairs in the bedroom, away from outside walls, and covered it with new plastic. Doreen Walsh's club chairs followed, delivered by a furniture mover who left them just inside the door because the porch decking was incomplete. The chairs were heavier than their photographs suggested. Their pink damask had faded unevenly, preserving bright bands beneath the cushions like embarrassing underwear. One arm sagged where padding had collapsed, but the frames were sound. Evelyn worked around Mateo's hammering. She stripped fabric while he fitted decking, stitched curved seams while he rebuilt the post base, and swept sawdust from her cut pieces twice a day. The noise should have been unbearable. Instead, it gave the cottage a pulse. On the 4th afternoon, Mateo installed the final length of flashing where the porch roof met the facade. He tucked it properly behind the clapboards and sealed each vulnerable joint. "Throw water at it," Evelyn said. He looked down from the ladder. "You don't trust me?" "I trust weather more." He used a hose from the repaired cottage line. Water ran over the porch roof and away from the wall. Inside, Evelyn watched the window casing remain dry. The old aluminum pot stayed beneath the sink. She paid the porch balance with Doreen's deposit and part of Marjorie's final payment. Her savings had fallen below $15,000, but the immediate red column was nearly empty. Roof, power, water, heat, porch. Each word had a figure beside it and a check mark. The yellow column remained long. Oil, weather stripping, lean-to sill, damaged plaster, chimney cleaning, west bedroom window. The green column had begun to creep onto a second page. Marjorie collected all 6 dining chairs the week before Thanksgiving. She ran her hand over each slate blue seat, checking the cream stripes. "They line up," she said. "They're meant to. You should have seen the curtains a woman made me last year." "I'm trying not to." Frank carried the chairs 2 at a time to the station wagon. He had brought his staple gun in its case. "For your shop," he said, offering it to Evelyn. "It works fine. I'm retiring from upholstery." She accepted because refusing would have made his embarrassment larger. "I'll keep it for emergencies, such as someone trying to use it on furniture." Doreen's chairs took longer. The herringbone had to be matched across the curved backs, and the new padding changed the way the fabric pulled around the arms. Evelyn unpicked one seam after midnight and sewed it again because the line wandered by less than a 1/4 inch. Her hands cramped in the cold even with the furnace running. She kept a mug of warm water beside the machine and wrapped her fingers around it between seams. When the right wrist began to ache sharply, she stopped for an entire day. The delay cost her pride, but not the deadline. Doreen collected the finished chairs the morning light snow began to fall. Against the charcoal cloth, the cleaned walnut legs looked darker and richer. The pair no longer seemed old. They seemed certain of what they were. Doreen stood between them with both hands pressed to her cheeks. "My mother bought these in 1958, she said. "I was going to throw them out." Evelyn brushed a loose thread from one arm. Most good frames outlive bad decisions. Doreen paid the balance and asked for a stack of Evelyn's cards. I don't have cards. You need cards. I need a room larger than 12 feet. You'll get that, too. The compliment followed Evelyn after the chairs left. She stood at the cleared sewing table, looking at the two pale rectangles their legs had protected from dust. Work had come in. Work had gone out. Money had arrived and departed almost in the same breath, but a portion remained. Enough for oil. Enough for groceries that were not soup. The phone rang. Daniel asked if she was coming to Thanksgiving dinner. Evelyn had expected the invitation and still took too long to answer. "Laura's making the turkey," he said. "Just the three of us. I can pick you up." "What time?" His relief was audible. "Around 1. He arrived wearing the same navy coat. Snow had melted on the lane, leaving dark gravel and shallow puddles. He looked up at the repaired porch as he approached. "This is new. It's repaired. Looks good." The words were stiff, but they were the first unqualified kindness he had offered the cottage. Inside, he noticed the clean ceiling fixture, the level table, and the repaired outlets. His gaze lingered on the empty space where Doreen's chairs had stood. Still doing jobs? Yes. Making anything? It was an accountant's question. Daniel had always trusted numbers more than descriptions. A little after materials. How much is a little? Enough to buy oil. He nodded. That's good. Evelyn put on her better coat and locked the cottage. Daniel offered his arm at the porch steps, perhaps because the boards were damp, perhaps because he needed to feel like a son for 1 second. She took it. At his house, her walnut sideboard stood in the dining room beneath the bright mirror. Laura had arranged white candles across its surface and placed Harold's silver serving spoon beside a bowl of cranberries. "You made it," Laura said, embracing Evelyn carefully. "I was invited." "Of course you were." Harold's reading chair had been moved from Daniel's den into the living room. A folded throw covered the place where his elbow had worn the upholstery thin. Evelyn touched the chair back as she passed. Dinner was good. Laura's turkey was dry at the edges, but so had Evelyn's been for most of her marriage. They drank wine. Daniel told a story about a client who had joined a video meeting wearing hunting camouflage. Laura teased him for checking email at the table. For half an hour, they were almost the family they remembered. Then Laura brought out pie, and Daniel placed a business card beside Evelyn's plate. The real estate agent's name was embossed in dark green. Evelyn looked at it without touching it. "He did an updated estimate on the land," Daniel said. "Nothing formal. You invited me here for this?" "No. I invited you because it's Thanksgiving." "And seasoned the pie with real estate?" Laura sat down slowly. "We thought it might ease your mind to know you have options." "I know I have options." "The market could soften by spring," Daniel said. "If you spend all winter fixing things and then sell for the same amount, what have you gained? A winter with a roof. You're taking this personally." Evelyn met his eyes. "You made it personal when you left me there." Daniel's face closed. "I brought you groceries. I offered you a room. After. After what? After I found water. After I hired someone. After I turned the heat on. You offered help when it no longer required you to interrupt dinner." Laura looked down at her plate. Daniel pushed back from the table. "That's unfair. Perhaps. But it's mine." She picked up the business card, tore it once through the embossed name, and placed both halves beside the pie. No one spoke on the drive back. At the cottage, Daniel stopped beside the porch, but did not turn off the engine. Snow moved through the headlights in thin white lines. "You're going to regret shutting people out," he said. Evelyn opened the door. "I'm not shutting you out, Daniel. I'm asking you to come without trying to move me." He stared through the windshield. She stepped into the snow and closed the car door gently. Inside, the furnace hummed. The repaired roof held. The front room smelled faintly of cut fabric, and the apple butter Ruth had pretended was defective. Evelyn switched on the lamp beside the sewing machine. On the table, her notebook waited beneath 3 new phone messages from people who had seen Doreen's chairs. The first caller wanted 2 sofa cushions rebuilt because her husband sank 6 inches every time he sat down. The second had a footstool with a split seam. The third said only, "Doreen gave me your number and told me not to buy anything until I spoke to you." Evelyn called them back in order. She accepted the footstool immediately, scheduled the cushions for after Christmas, and asked the third woman to send photographs before she promised anything. By noon, 3 jobs occupied the next page of her notebook. Their combined labor would not replace what she had spent on the roof, but it would cover oil if winter behaved politely. Winter did not. The first lasting snow filled the orchard rows to the height of Evelyn's boot tops. Wind came off the hill and found every gap in the cottage. The repaired roof kept weather out, but the old windows leaked cold around their frames. The rear lean-to might as well have been built from screen doors, and the downstairs bedroom floor held the temperature of the ground beneath it. Mateo showed Evelyn how to apply removable rope caulk around the window sashes without sealing them permanently shut. "You'll want these open in spring," he said. "In spring I may set fire to the furnace and sleep in the orchard. Have the chimney cleaned first." They installed weather stripping at the front door and insulated the accessible sections of water pipe in the lean-to. Evelyn did the low, simple runs while Mateo handled the cramped section beneath the kitchen. "Not too tight," he told her. "Crushed insulation works less. So do people." "You finally agree." "I agree in theory." Ruth drove her to the hardware store when the gravel lane became too icy for delivery vans. Evelyn bought pipe wrap, window film, a second smoke detector, 2 tubes of caulk, and a pair of thick work gloves she took off whenever she needed to feel what she was doing. On the way back, Ruth's truck heater made a squeal that rose and fell with the fan. "Is that normal?" Evelyn asked. "It's seasonal music. It sounds trapped. It stops when I hit the dashboard." Ruth struck the dash with the heel of her hand. The squeal ceased. "Professional repair," she said. Evelyn looked down at the torn truck seat. The spring no longer protruded because Ruth had covered it with a folded horse blanket. "You keep bringing me customers while driving on that. The seat has character. The seat has a weapon." Evelyn measured it in the orchard barn. She used durable brown vinyl left over from a restaurant booth job years earlier, enough of which had survived in one of her moving boxes. Ruth paid for new foam and insisted on paying labor. Evelyn reduced the labor by the value of the hardware trips, potatoes, onions, stew, and the suspicious jar of apple butter. Ruth objected to the apple butter. The lid was crooked. The lid was perfect. "You can prove nothing." They settled on $80. The repaired seat was not elegant, but it was firm and no longer dangerous. Ruth sat behind the wheel and bounced twice. "I've lost the understanding I had with the spring. You'll recover." By Christmas, Evelyn's front room contained a rotating collection of adult lives in furniture form: a footstool clawed by an old cat, 2 couch cushions flattened by a large husband, a reading chair polished dark where its owner rested her hand, and a dining bench whose torn underside had been repaired 3 times with duct tape. Each piece came with a story its owner told while standing in Evelyn's doorway. She learned who cared for an aging sister, who had changed jobs, who had lost a spouse, and who pretended not to miss a house sold years earlier. Most did not require advice. They required someone to notice that a chair worth repairing was not foolish simply because it was old. Daniel sent a holiday card signed by both him and Laura. Inside was a gift certificate to a restaurant in Brattleboro and a note for when you need a break from cooking. Evelyn appreciated the gift. She also noticed it required transportation she did not have. She called to thank them anyway. Daniel asked about the heat before he asked about her work. It was concern, perhaps, or evidence gathering. Evelyn told him the furnace was running. "Oil's expensive," he said. "Yes? You still have time to reconsider before the deep cold." "Merry Christmas, Daniel." He let the subject go. January announced itself through the kitchen window with frost feathering the inside corners. Evelyn kept the thermostat at 62 during the day and 58 at night, wore Harold's cream sweater beneath her work jacket, and heated only the rooms she used. Her oil delivery cost $712. She wrote the number in her notebook and sat with it a while. Sewing income for December had been $940 before materials. Better than she expected, less than the cottage could consume without effort. Her pension covered food, fuel, taxes set aside monthly, phone service, and the ordinary bills that did not care whether her roof had once leaked. Her savings stood at $11,816. The number was not ruin. It was not comfort either. The cold deepened for 4 days without rising above zero. Orchard branches cracked at night. Snow became dry enough to squeak beneath boots. Ruth's truck would not start, and even Mateo postponed outdoor work. On the 5th morning, Evelyn turned the kitchen tap and heard nothing. She opened the cupboard. The pipe was cold but not split. In the lean-to, frost white as flour coated the lower wall where wind entered beneath a warped board. The insulated supply line had frozen somewhere near the rear sill. Evelyn shut off the pump and opened the faucets to relieve pressure. She knew that much now. Then she placed a safe electric heater near the pipe, not touching, not unattended, and waited. 3 hours later, there was still no water. Mateo answered on the 4th ring. Behind his voice came the sound of another man shouting and water striking a floor. "I've got 2 burst lines in Guilford," he said. "Can you stay with Ruth? Her truck won't start. Can you get there on foot?" "Yes." "Shut off closed?" "Yes." "Pump off?" "Yes." "Good. Don't use a torch. Don't put the heater inside the wall. I can come late tonight or first thing tomorrow. I'll manage." "I know. That's not the same as being warm." The words nearly undid her. After they hung up, Evelyn carried empty containers toward the orchard hydrant. The cold pinched her nostrils together. Halfway uphill, she stopped to breathe and look back at the cottage. Snow softened its failures. The peeling clapboards looked almost white again. The steep repaired roof held a clean, dark line beneath the sky. Smoke rose from the central chimney's furnace flue, but the sight offered less reassurance than it had a month earlier. She was tired of calculating, tired of carrying water, tired of treating every warm room as a financial decision. Back inside, she called Daniel. He answered from his office. She could hear typing. "The line froze," she said. "What line?" "The cottage water." "Did it burst?" "Not yet." "Then you caught it." She waited. Daniel stopped typing. "What do you need?" The question should have helped. Instead, Evelyn found she did not know how to answer without handing him the conclusion he wanted. A ride, perhaps. Someone to help me get water. Mateo can't come until tonight. I've got a budget review at 2 and the roads are bad here. Can Ruth help? Her truck is dead. Call a car service. Out here? Another silence. "I told you this place would be impossible in winter," he said. Evelyn closed her eyes. "I didn't call for a forecast. I'm not trying to be cruel. I'm saying this is exactly why the sale option matters. You shouldn't be hauling water at your age. Then come help me haul it. I just told you I can't leave. You won't. That's not fair." "No," Evelyn said. "It's cold." She hung up before he could answer. 10 minutes later, a text arrived. It contained the real estate agent's phone number. Daniel had added, "He can arrange everything. At least hear him out." Evelyn sat on the less wobbly kitchen chair. The cottage was warm enough, but her wet trouser cuffs chilled her ankles. On the sewing table, a half-finished cushion waited beneath the machine needle. She called the number. The agent, a man named Stephen Cole, recognized both her name and the property. Daniel had already spoken to him. "Just preliminary conversations," Stephen said quickly. "No obligation at all. He offered to visit when the roads cleared, prepare a market analysis, and explain what an ass's sale might bring." His tone was pleasant. Nothing about the process sounded criminal or even unfair. That would be fine, Evelyn heard herself say. They scheduled the visit for Saturday. Mateo arrived after dark carrying 2 portable heaters and a thermal camera. He found the frozen section behind the rotted rear sill, where cold air crossed the pipe despite the insulation. Nothing had split. He warmed it gradually, blocked the draft temporarily, and restored the water just before 10. His bill was $640, including the emergency hours and the insulation repair. Evelyn paid without speaking. "You all right?" he asked. "I'm selling." Mateo put the check in his coat pocket. "All right." She looked at him sharply. "That's all? It's your house. Ruth will argue. Ruth argues with parking signs. I expected you to tell me I've come too far." He closed his tool bag. Distance already traveled isn't a reason to keep going somewhere you don't want to go. The answer was so sensible that it felt like desertion. At the door, Mateo stopped. "But don't sell tonight," he said. "Tonight you're cold and angry, and $640 poorer. Those are real things. They're not permanent instructions." Stephen arrived Saturday in a clean sport utility vehicle and polished shoes unsuitable for the lane. He walked through the cottage, took measurements, photographed the 2 front windows, the small porch, the kitchen lean-to, and the orchard rising behind the shed. He praised the repaired roof and frowned at the unfinished walls. His estimated sale range was respectable, but not transformative. After fees and moving costs, Evelyn could afford a modest rental for several years, perhaps longer if rent stayed kind. "What happens after several years?" she asked. Stephen's professional smile faltered. "There are different senior housing options." The word options had followed her from Daniel's dining table. Stephen placed a listing agreement on the kitchen table for her review. Evelyn saw the cottage through his photographs, small, weathered, imperfect. Then she saw her notebook beside them. Roof paid, porch paid, electrical safe, furnace serviced, jobs completed, customers waiting. The frozen pipe had not revealed that the cottage was impossible. It had revealed one draft behind one sill, now blocked. Stephen offered her a pen. Evelyn touched it but did not pick it up. "If I call you in spring," she asked, "will the paper still exist?" He smiled more naturally. "I expect so." "Then I don't need it today." After he drove away, Evelyn called Daniel. "I'm not listing," she said. "What changed?" "Nothing. That's the point." He began to speak, but she continued. "If you send another agent to solve me, I won't answer the door. You called him, after you sent him instead of yourself." Daniel went silent. Evelyn looked toward the lean-to, where the pipe ran warm inside new insulation. "I needed my son," she said. "You sent a man with a camera." Then she ended the call. The silence after the call felt different from the cottage's first night. Then Evelyn had waited for Daniel to come back. Now she knew he would not. She set the phone beside the notebook and finished the cushion beneath her needle. The machine drove through the fabric with its steady mechanical hum. At the corner, she slowed, turned the work precisely, and continued the seam. Ruth learned about Stephen Cole 2 days later. "Daniel sent you a real estate agent during a freeze? He sent me a number. I called. That is not less irritating. It was my choice, so was not signing." Ruth stood in the lean-to with a bag of pipe insulation tucked beneath one arm. She had come to help seal the remaining draft near the repaired sill. "I'm not asking you to defend me," Evelyn said. "I'm not. I'm practicing insults for Daniel. You won't see him. I'm planning ahead." They removed the warped baseboard where cold air had reached the supply line. Mateo had closed the largest gap, but smaller ones remained along the foundation. Evelyn cut rigid insulation to fit, while Ruth sealed the edges with approved foam. Neither woman mentioned that Ruth had brought lunch. The cold snap finally broke with a day of dripping eaves and softening snow. Water ran down the repaired roof, crossed the new flashing, and fell clear of the porch. Evelyn stood outside in her boots and watched until her socks were wet. The cottage had survived the worst week of winter. So had she, though neither looked improved by it. February settled into a pattern. Sew in the morning, answer calls at noon. Carry finished work to the porch for pickup. Check the oil gauge every Sunday and resent it. Snow narrowed the gravel lane until customers had to back out carefully between banks. The front room became too crowded for living. A rolled rug waited beneath the window. 2 armchairs occupied the wall. Boxes of foam blocked the built-in shelves. Evelyn ate dinner at the kitchen table with fabric samples spread beneath her plate. One afternoon, a customer named Nancy Ames brought a Victorian footstool and stayed for coffee. Another arrived before Nancy left, carrying 3 loose couch cushions. The two women began comparing the age of their furniture, as if discussing elderly relatives. "Mine came from my husband's mother," Nancy said. "Mine came with my husband," the other woman replied. "The cushions have held up better." Evelyn laughed so hard she had to set down the coffee pot. After they left, the cottage seemed warmer than the thermostat explained. She printed simple business cards at an office shop in town during one of Ruth's supply trips. Evelyn Mercer, upholstery repair and recovering. Beneath the words, she put her phone number and the cottage lane. No logo, no promise of transformation. She placed 10 cards in a chipped saucer by the front door. They were gone within a week. Daniel did not call. Once, Laura sent a message asking if the pipes were all right. Evelyn answered yes. Laura replied with a blue heart, then nothing. The restraint surprised her. It also hurt. Evelyn had wanted them to stop supervising her. But some mornings she caught herself watching the lane for the dark sedan. Anger did not eliminate habit. Independence did not answer the phone in her son's voice. March winds pressed rain against the cottage. The roof and porch remained dry. Meltwater pooled near the rear lean-to where the ground sloped badly, and Evelyn spent 2 afternoons cutting a shallow drainage channel with a borrowed spade. Mateo inspected it before she finished. "Too deep near the foundation," he said. "It needs somewhere to go. So does the foundation, if you dig under it." He showed her how to widen the channel and line it with salvaged stone from the overgrown path. Evelyn had assumed the work would take 1 day. It took 4, plus a 5th spent resting her back. The mud revealed what snow had concealed. Peeling paint curled from the clapboards. Weeds crowded the front walk. A downspout ended 6 inches above a hole it had carved beside the porch. Spring did not make the cottage prettier. It made the list longer. Evelyn stood in the lane with her notebook and divided the problems again. Water management first, rear sill next, exterior paint when nights stayed warm, shed only after the cottage itself was secure. Then she looked through the shed's cracked pane at the furniture stacked across her front room. "Shed sooner," she amended. Mateo's price for making the shed usable came to $3,100. Repair the leaking rear roof edge, replace the damaged door frame, reglaze the window, run a safe electrical circuit from the cottage, install outlets and work lighting, and level the worst section of floor. No insulation, no heat, no finished walls. Evelyn crossed out the door frame replacement. "Door still closes if you lift it," she said. "That's not closing. That's negotiation." "I've lived with negotiation." He crossed out replacement and wrote repair hinges, add weather stop. She crossed out the floor leveling. "No," Mateo said. "I can shim the work table. The floor is soft near the back wall. Then repair that section. Leave the rest." He adjusted the figure. They brought the estimate down to $2,240. Evelyn could remove debris, clean the walls, salvage shelves from Ruth's packing barn, and paint the interior herself. Mateo would handle the roof edge, damaged floor, door, and electrical work. It was still more than she wanted to spend. "How much did the front room earn last month?" he asked. "That's not your business. Then keep sewing in it." He folded the estimate and handed it back. Evelyn waited 3 days before signing. The thaw made access to the shed miserable. Mud sucked at Mateo's boots and trapped one wheel of his truck. Ruth arrived on her tractor, attached a chain, and pulled him free while offering detailed criticism of his driving. "I was avoiding your tree," he called over the engine. "The tree has been there since 1949. "Exactly. It knows how to move." Ruth had removed 6 sturdy wooden shelves from an unused section of her packing barn. In exchange, Evelyn made new canvas pads for 2 sorting stools and repaired the torn vinyl on a tractor armrest. The exchange was written in her notebook at fair value on both sides. "Why are you writing down barter?" Ruth asked. "So I know whether I'm working or accepting presents. You could do both occasionally. I could also take up downhill skiing." Inside the shed, Evelyn found no hidden cache, no valuable antiques, no forgotten envelope of cash. She found rusted hinges, mouse nests, 3 bent saws, and a box of roofing nails fused into one orange lump. Among Harold's lumber stacks were usable lengths of pine. Mateo tested them, rejected boards softened by damp, and set aside enough sound wood for shelf supports and a fabric rack. Evelyn ran her hand along one board. Harold had penciled a measurement across it, then crossed it out and written a different one. "He bought this for something," she said. "He bought most lumber for something." "I wish I knew what." Mateo lifted the board to his shoulder. "Now you do." He used it for a work table brace. The rear floor repair revealed rot, but no structural surprise. The joists beneath were sound. Mateo replaced 4 feet of boards with salvaged tongue and groove planks he had removed from another old house and priced below new lumber. They did not match perfectly. Evelyn preferred them that way. The visible change marked where the failure had ended. While he worked, she stripped peeling wallpaper from the cottage front room. Beneath the faded roses were cracked plaster, old nail holes, and a pencil line where someone had once measured a cabinet. She repaired the cracks with setting compound under Mateo's instruction. The first patch bulged. "Too much," he said. "It shrinks. Not that much." She sanded it down and tried again. By the 5th crack, her hand understood the angle of the knife. She left the pencil line visible until the last day, then covered it with primer. Laura called while Evelyn was washing plaster dust from her hair at the kitchen sink. "I owe you an apology," she said without greeting. Evelyn shut off the water. "For which item?" "That's fair. I wasn't trying to be clever." "I know." Laura paused. "I knew the cottage had been empty. I knew no one had checked it recently. I let Daniel call it a gift because it solved a problem for us." The honesty did not soothe Evelyn. It opened a clean edge in the wound. "Thank you for saying it. I should have gone with him that day." "Yes." Laura seemed to expect forgiveness after confession. Evelyn had once done the same thing, said sorry to Harold, then waited for his pain to become proof that she had apologized correctly. "I don't know how to fix this," Laura said. "You can stop helping Daniel move me." "I have." "Good. What are you doing now?" "Turning the shed into a workroom." Laura made a small, surprised sound. "The old shed? There's only one." "That could be nice. It could be useful." Neither woman mentioned Daniel. By May, the orchard behind the cottage foamed with white blossoms. The lane dried. Evelyn opened both front windows and let air carry winter's smell out of the rooms. She painted the front room a soft, warm white using paint, bought with the profit from 2 armchairs and a sofa cushion set. The built-in shelves remained scarred. The floor still sloped slightly toward the central chimney. Without furniture jobs crowding the walls, the room looked modest and almost empty. Evelyn owned little to put in it. The knowledge stung less than she expected. She bought a scratched maple table at a second-hand shop for $40 and repaired one loose leg. She kept the less wobbly kitchen chair because it had earned its place. For the front room, she rebuilt an abandoned armchair frame a customer had intended to discard, using leftover padding and pieces of fabric too small for paid work. The upholstery was not perfectly matched, but the chair was comfortable. Nothing wore blue tape. Mateo finished the shed wiring on a clear Thursday afternoon. 4 bright fixtures came on above the work table. Outlets ran along the wall at safe intervals. Ruth's shelves held fabric, webbing, foam, and jars of labeled hardware. Harold's pine brace supported the cutting surface. Moving the sewing machine required Mateo, Ruth, a furniture dolly, 2 planks over the path, and an argument about who had the stronger back. "None of us," Mateo said. "That's why the dolly exists." They guided the machine out the front door, across the gravel, and into the shed on the right. Evelyn chose its position beneath the repaired window, where she could see the cottage and the orchard slope without turning from her work. She plugged it into the new outlet. The motor started with a familiar hum. Light filled the modest shed. The door still needed lifting. The floor still bore stains older than Daniel. Wind moved through gaps in the walls. But for the first time in years, Evelyn had a room built around the work everyone had called extra. Ruth leaned against the work table and listened to the machine. "Sounds expensive," she said. "It sounds exactly as it did in the front room. Everything sounds more expensive under new lighting." Mateo crouched beside the outlet with his tester. "Run it at full speed." Evelyn pressed the knee control. The needle drove rapidly through a folded scrap. The work lights did not flicker. No breaker tripped. The motor settled into its old smooth pitch. Mateo stood. "Circuit's good." Evelyn slowed the machine and examined the stitches. So is this. They marked the occasion with coffee on the porch. Ruth brought cider donuts from town. Mateo ate two while claiming he did not like sweet food. The orchard blossoms moved behind them in a warm wind, and bees worked the nearest rows. Evelyn had spent most of winter trying to keep weather outside. Now the cottage doors stood open. The shed changed how she worked almost immediately. Fabric could remain unrolled overnight. Frames no longer had to be shifted whenever she wanted to eat dinner. Customers came through the side path instead of carrying furniture across the cottage's front room. The first week, Evelyn completed a channel-back chair, 4 dining seats, and the 2 sofa cushions promised in winter. She also accepted a large rolled-arm sofa after convincing herself that Ruth's trailer and Mateo's dolly solved the question of moving it. They did not solve the question of her body. The sofa barely cleared the shed door. Its frame was sound, but lifting and turning it required help every time she worked on the lower edge. Evelyn spent 2 days bent over the arms and woke on the third, unable to close her right hand without pain. She sat at the kitchen table trying to grip her coffee cup with both hands. Mateo found her there when he came to check the rear sill. "Where does it hurt?" "It's stiff. That's not a location. Wrist, thumb, forearm." He looked toward the shed. "What are you working on?" "A sofa." "By yourself?" "It holds still." Not what I asked. Evelyn had expected teasing. His irritation offended her. "I've worked on sofas before." "When you were what age?" She stared at him. Mateo raised both palms. "Not saying you can't do the work. I'm saying the work sends a bill. I'm not paying a doctor to tell me to rest, then accept the free version." He was right, which made his manner unforgivable. Evelyn called the sofa's owner and added 10 days to the deadline. The woman was disappointed. "I arranged to have people over," she said. "I understand. You said it would be ready." "I did. I was wrong." There was no graceful way to say it. Evelyn offered to return the deposit and arrange delivery of the stripped sofa at her expense. The owner chose to wait, but her cool tone remained with Evelyn long after the call. For a week, Evelyn did no sewing. She sorted hardware with her left hand, answered messages, and walked the property making lists she could not act on. Rest felt less like recovery than uselessness. Ruth brought a wrist brace from town and placed it on the porch rail. "I didn't ask for that." "I know. If you had, I'd have brought the right size." "It fit perfectly." "Mateo told you?" "No. Your coffee cup told me. You weren't here. Mateo told me." When the pain eased, Evelyn changed her rules. No full sofas unless a second paid worker was available for handling. No 2 large chairs due the same week. Deposits would include delivery costs rather than treating transport as an inconvenience to solve later. She raised her labor rate by 12%. She expected the phone to stop ringing. It did not. The rear lean-to sill came next. Mateo lifted the damaged corner just enough to remove the rotted section, then scarfed new wood into the sound original timber. Evelyn paid $1,300, photographed the repair, and crossed the last structural item from the yellow column. "What happens to the old piece?" she asked. "It's rotten." "I can see that. You want it?" "No. I want to be present when something leaves without Laura putting tape on it." Mateo stared at her for a second, then carried the beam section to his debris trailer. "Would blue tape help?" he asked. "Get off my property." By June, the cottage exterior had become impossible to ignore. Paint peeled from the clapboards in long white curls. Dark wood showed beneath the two front windows. The green column in Evelyn's notebook had carried exterior paint for months, but green did not mean free. A professional painting estimate came to $6,800 because of the steep upper gable, scraping, lead-safe preparation, and repairs around the trim. Evelyn thanked the painter and set the estimate beneath her notebook. "I could do the lower half," she told Mateo. "You could. And the porch. Yes, you could do the high work, if you hire me. I'm not asking you to volunteer." "Good. I'm a terrible volunteer." They divided the job. Evelyn would scrape and prime everything reachable from the ground or porch floor, using containment cloths and proper protection. Mateo would handle the upper story, steep gables, and chimney-side trim. They would inspect clapboards as they went and replace only those too damaged to hold paint. Ruth donated nothing. She sold Evelyn several gallons of unopened warm cream exterior paint left from repainting the orchard office at half the store price. The color was softer than Evelyn had imagined and slightly warmer than the old white. "Why didn't you use it?" Evelyn asked. "Looked pink against the barn." "It isn't pink. Tell the barn." Evelyn bought dark forest green paint for the trim. The work stretched through summer. Scraping was slow and filthy. Flecks of old white paint collected on the ground cloth like scales. Evelyn worked in morning shade, stopped before the sun heated the facade, and sewed in the shed during the afternoon. Mateo replaced 7 clapboards. Not 70, not an entire wall. 7. "You look disappointed," he said. "I prepared emotionally for 12. You can pay me for 12. I'll endure." When the first cream section dried beneath the left front window, the cottage seemed to step forward from the orchard. The color did not make it larger. It revealed the proportions that neglect had blurred. The 2 evenly spaced windows, the central porch, the steep roof rising behind the brick chimney. Evelyn painted the window trim green with a 2-inch brush. The first line wavered. She wiped it before it dried and started again. Customers began commenting on the house before they reached the shed. "Charming," one woman called it. "Cozy," said another. A man collecting a repaired recliner asked whether Evelyn rented the cottage for weekends. "I live in it during the week, too," she said. He looked embarrassed. "I just meant it's got that vacation look. It has a plumbing bill look from inside." Laura called the evening Doreen posted a photograph online of her charcoal chairs sitting on Evelyn's newly painted porch. The caption praised Evelyn's work and included a glimpse of cream clapboard and dark green trim. "I saw the picture," Laura said. "The cottage looks adorable. Parts of it are painted. It looks completely different. It's the same house. You know what I mean." Evelyn did. Laura asked about the shed, the orchard, and whether the front room was finished. Her curiosity had a new brightness, as if the cottage had moved from problem to destination. "Daniel hasn't seen the picture," she said. "He's not really on those sites." Evelyn painted a thin stripe of green onto a scrapboard while they spoke. "You could show him. He still heard about your last call. He sent an agent instead of coming." "I know." The words lacked their old defense. Laura hesitated. "We'd like to see the place sometime. You're welcome to visit if you call first. That would be nice. Maybe when the paint is done, we could bring dinner and make a weekend of it." Evelyn set down the brush. "There's 1 bedroom. We could get a hotel. I only meant spend time there during the day. Sit outside, walk through the orchard. It could be a nice family place." A family place. When the cottage was cold, Laura had called it that property. "It's my home," Evelyn said. "Of course. I didn't mean otherwise. You did a little." Laura's silence admitted what her words would not. "I'm not assigning weekends," Evelyn continued. "If you and Daniel want to visit me, visit me. Don't reserve the scenery." That sounds harsher than I intended. It often does. They ended without setting a date. Evelyn went back outside and painted until the light failed. The cottage glowed softly against the dark orchard. The new color made the remaining peeling sections look worse, and for a moment she wished she had waited until the entire job could be completed at once. Then she remembered that waiting had been Harold's favorite form of progress. She cleaned the brush. Ruth helped with the ground around the cottage after Evelyn rejected 3 landscape plans she found online. "This one wants lavender," Ruth said, looking at a printed photograph. "Lavender wants France. It grows in Vermont. It complains." They chose plants that could survive cold, wet soil and neglect. Low juniper near the lane, sedum along the sunny porch edge, ferns where the rear lean-to cast shade. Ruth divided mature plants from the orchard office beds. Evelyn paid through new cushions for the office bench, and labor entered on both sides of her book. They cleared only enough brush to expose the foundation and the old stone line. The orchard remained an orchard, not a garden backdrop. For the path, Mateo delivered a small load of compacted gravel, left from another job and charged for material and hauling. Evelyn spread it 2 wheelbarrows at a time, then stopped when her wrist ached. By August, the cream paint wrapped the entire cottage. Dark green framed the windows, porch posts, and doors. The shed remained weathered, though Evelyn painted its trim to connect it visually to the house. Firewood stood stacked beneath a simple cover beside the lean-to. The place was repaired, not polished. Old clapboards still showed slight waves. The porch boards bore nail scars from their earlier life. The chimney bricks were uneven. Ruth stood in the lane with her hands on her hips. "Well?" Evelyn asked. "Looks like the same house." Evelyn waited. Only now it looks as though someone chose it. That evening, they ate tomato sandwiches on the porch with Mateo after he finished the last upper window. 3 adult voices carried into the orchard. Customers' furniture waited in the shed. Warm light shone through both front windows. Evelyn listened without needing to fill every silence. For years, belonging had meant being useful enough that family would keep a place for her. Here, usefulness had opened the door. But the people who entered had stayed for coffee. The coffee cups left rings on the porch rail. Evelyn sanded them away the next morning before applying the final coat of green paint. She worked slowly, stopping whenever her wrist tightened. By noon, the porch rail was dry enough to touch. The brushes were clean, and 2 customers had called. One wanted a price on replacing foam in a recliner. The other had seen the charcoal herringbone chairs and asked whether Evelyn worked in velvet. "Sometimes," Evelyn said. "I have a chair that needs something dramatic. Chairs rarely need drama. Owners do." The woman, Helen Parker, laughed and made an appointment. She arrived in Ruth's borrowed trailer because her own car could not tow. The chair strapped inside was a broad, high-backed armchair with rolled arms, a deep seat, and faded gold upholstery rubbed bald along the front edge. "It belonged to my aunt," Helen said. She smoked beside it for 30 years. Evelyn leaned close to the back. Old tobacco and dust remained in the padding. "It needs to come all the way down," she said. "Fabric, padding, probably webbing, maybe springs tied. I expected that. Full stripping costs more. I expected that too." People who expected the price were more unnerving than people who complained about it. Inside the shed, Helen opened sample books across the work table. She dismissed gray as lifeless, green as too predictable, and burgundy as something a judge would sit in. Her hand stopped on a deep blue performance velvet. "That," she said. The blue was saturated without shine, dark enough to hold shadow in the folds. Evelyn rubbed it against the grain and watched the color change beneath her fingers. "It will show pressure marks," she warned. "So do I." They agreed on the fabric. The job would be Evelyn's largest single-chair commission since leaving the furniture shop. The labor included removing smoke-saturated padding, cleaning and sealing the frame, retying springs, rebuilding the seat, matching the nap, and making a fitted arm cover for each side. Helen paid the deposit and scheduled pickup for late October. "Don't rush it," she said. "I've waited 11 years." Evelyn ordered extra fabric because velvet punished optimistic measurements. She was removing the old gold cloth when Laura called. We were thinking of coming up for a foliage weekend, Laura said. Not this weekend. Maybe next month. Evelyn pulled a tack from the chair frame. To visit? Of course to visit. All right. We could stay nearby. Unless there's room at the cottage now? The cottage did not grow. I know. I thought perhaps the shed had a loft. It has a roof. Laura laughed, then realized Evelyn had not made a joke. We could book somewhere, she said. Daniel's been working too much. It would be good for him to get away. Does Daniel want to come? He will once we organize it. The phrasing was familiar. Laura often transformed a wish into a family decision before Daniel noticed he had participated. You should ask him, Evelyn said. I will. We could bring groceries, do a nice dinner, maybe spend a few days there while you work. The orchard must be beautiful in October. It is Ruth's orchard. I understand that. I only mean the whole setting. Evelyn set the tack into a jar. Laura, you're welcome to come have dinner with me. You are not welcome to use my house as a vacation rental. I didn't say that. You said a few days there while I work. I meant with you. In one bedroom? We'd get a hotel at night. So you want the porch and orchard during daylight hours. Laura's voice took on the brittle patience she used when a store clerk explained a return policy she disliked. Why are you determined to hear this badly? Because you didn't want to spend a day here when it had no water. There was silence. Evelyn regretted the sentence, but did not withdraw it. Finally, Laura said, people are allowed to change their minds. Yes, so are we. About visiting me? About the cottage? About what it could be for the family? There it was. Evelyn looked through the shed window. The cream cottage stood beyond the gravel path, its 2 green-trimmed windows open to the September air. Laundry moved on a small line near the rear, lean-to. Nothing about it waited for a family designation. It already is something, she said. To you. I know. No, Laura, you don't know if that's followed by but. Laura exhaled. I'm going to let Daniel talk to you. He can call. Daniel waited 4 days. His voice was controlled when he finally did, as though he had prepared notes. Laura says you jumped down her throat for suggesting a visit. She suggested using the place. She suggested spending time as a family. She told me the cottage could be something for the family. It was Dad's cottage. And then you called it worthless and transferred it to me. I gave it to you. Evelyn stopped sewing. The machine's motor faded into silence. No, she said. You gave me the keys. The cottage was part of what your father left. You kept the proceeds from the house and called this my fair share, according to the arrangement Dad made. Yes. So what are we arguing about? The word gave. Daniel breathed into the phone. Somewhere near him, a printer started. I've tried to respect what you're doing, he said, but if the property is in better shape now, we should look at the larger picture. We? You've put money into it. The market's strong. Selling now might actually return your investment. My roof is not a stock. That's not what I mean. It's keeping rain off my bed. The return is immediate. What happens in 5 years? 10? Are you going to climb around painting and fixing pipes at 78? I don't climb around now. I hire help. With what money? The money I earn. Mom, upholstery is not a retirement plan. No, it's work. You're making this about whether I respect your sewing. You made my sewing part of the argument when you decided it could not support anything important. Daniel's voice rose. I'm trying to keep you from exhausting your savings on a building that will always need more. Evelyn looked around the shed. The repaired pane admitted clear afternoon light. Ruth's shelves held labeled materials. Finished dining cushions waited for collection. Beneath her hand, the blue velvet lay straight and smooth. It does need more, she said. So do I. He had no prepared answer for that. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. Laura showed me the photograph. What photograph? The one online. The chairs on the porch. I couldn't tell much from it. Evelyn imagined the cropped image, cream-clabbered, green rail, perhaps the edge of one glowing front window. You should see it, Daniel said. The words almost sounded like longing. You may visit, she replied. Call first. I'm not asking permission to visit my mother. You are asking permission to come to my house." He ended the call without choosing a date. Evelyn returned to the blue chair. Its frame needed more repair than the first inspection revealed. 2 springs had been tied with cotton cord that crumbled at a touch. One corner block was loose. The old padding retained smoke even after the fabric was removed. She called Helen and explained the added work and cost. "Do whatever it needs," Helen said. "I'll send a revised estimate. I trust you. Read the estimate anyway." Evelyn cleaned the frame, reglued the block, and retied all 8 springs so the seat moved as a unit. She cut new burlap and stitched the spring tops through it by hand. The work punished her fingers. She spread it across several days. Outside, leaves began to turn along the orchard's upper rows. Customers came and went. Nancy brought a jar of pickles with her footstool and insisted it was not payment. Frank returned the old staple gun because he missed having it, then bought a hand stapler designed for light household use after Evelyn made him promise not to upholster a chair. Doreen stopped for coffee and left with 3 business cards for friends. Ruth began the apple harvest. Evelyn helped at the orchard table 2 mornings, sorting fruit into boxes while resting from sewing. Ruth paid the same hourly rate she paid every seasonal adult worker. "You don't need to pay me," Evelyn said. "Then stop sorting." Evelyn kept sorting. She used the orchard wages to buy 2 gallons of dark green paint for the shed door and a load of seasoned firewood. Mateo built a simple cover beside the cottage using paid time and lumber Evelyn had salvaged. She stacked each split piece herself, 6 at a time in the wheelbarrow, refusing Ruth's prediction that the pile would lean. It leaned. Mateo corrected the bottom row without comment. By early October, the sedum along the porch had darkened to rust. Ferns yellowed near the rear lean-to. Fallen apples sweetened the damp air. Evelyn closed the windows at night and had the furnace serviced before the first hard frost. The blue chair progressed from bare frame to muslin-covered shape. New padding rounded the arms. Evelyn centered the velvet along the back, checked the nap beneath both natural and electric light, then attached it, inch by inch. The finished chair had presence without looking grand. Deep blue gathered shadow beneath the rolled arms and brightened where the fabric curved over the back. Evelyn made protective arm covers from the same cloth and a fitted muslin wrap for transport. Helen set pickup for the last Thursday in October. Evelyn wrote the date on the wall calendar, only then did she notice. It was the same date Daniel had left her at the cottage. She did not believe in signs. Dates repeated because calendars were circular and people liked patterns. Still, she stood beneath the calendar with the pencil in her hand, remembering a dark sedan on wet gravel and 3 keys falling into her palm. 1 year. The cottage had not made the year easy. It had demanded money, labor, judgment, and help Evelyn had once been ashamed to accept. Her savings had stabilized, but not returned to their old level. Upholstery income covered operating costs and modest improvements, not fantasies. The shed remained uninsulated. The upstairs room still needed plaster. The kitchen cabinet still closed best with a kick. Yet every repair belonged to a decision she had made. 2 days before the pickup, Laura sent a message. "Daniel may come Thursday. He wants to talk in person." Evelyn replied, "He needs to call." No call came. Thursday morning arrived with rain drumming steadily on the repaired roof. Evelyn ate breakfast, checked the kitchen tap from old habit, and carried the fitted muslin wrap to the shed. By noon, the rain had stopped. Mist lingered above the orchard. Wet leaves covered the gravel path, and the charcoal sky held the day in a dim, pearly light. Helen was due at 4. Evelyn rolled the deep blue chair from the shed to the small front porch on a dolly, then removed the straps. It stood beside her against the warm cream facade, framed by dark green trim and amber light from the front windows. She began fastening the protective cloth around its lower half. At 3:47, an engine sounded at the end of the gravel lane. Evelyn tightened one knot and looked up. A dark sedan turned between the wet orchard rows. The sedan slowed as it entered the lane. For 1 second, Evelyn thought Daniel might keep going. He passed the stone line, braked, and reversed several feet before turning toward the cottage. Wet leaves pressed beneath his tires. The car stopped at an angle, as if he had forgotten how he meant to park. Daniel remained behind the wheel. Evelyn fastened another tie around the blue chair. The protective cloth covered its legs and lower frame, but the deep velvet back rose above it, holding the muted late-afternoon light. When Daniel finally stepped out, he left the car door open. His gaze traveled from the repaired steep roof to the central brick chimney, down across the warm cream clapboards and dark forest green trim. Both front windows glowed behind Evelyn. The porch roof no longer sagged. A neat gravel path crossed the wet, russet leaves. Firewood stood stacked beside the rear lean-to. Ferns and sedum darkened the modest beds along the house. Behind everything, mist rested among the orchard rows. The original shed remained on the right, its green-trimmed door propped open to reveal work lights and shelves. Daniel looked at the lane marker, then back at the cottage. "I almost drove past," he said. "You've been here before. It didn't look like this. It looked exactly like this. Some parts were just failing." He closed the car door without taking his eyes from the house. Evelyn stood beside the chair in her moss-green canvas jacket, cream sweater, dark trousers, and scuffed brown boots. A year earlier, he had left her on the same porch with 3 keys in her palm and the sewing machine under plastic. Now he seemed uncertain whether he should approach without invitation. That uncertainty was new. "You didn't call," she said. "I know. Laura said you might come. I didn't decide until this afternoon. That is generally when people use a telephone. I thought you might tell me not to." "I might have." Daniel looked at the blue chair. "Did you make that?" "I rebuilt it. It looks new. The frame is 70 years old." He walked toward the porch, stopping at the bottom step. His hand pressed lightly against the repaired rail. "Is it solid?" Mateo would be hurt by the question. "Mateo still working here?" "When I hire him." Daniel nodded. He examined the green painted posts, the new flashing, the straight edge of the porch roof. There was no useful criticism available, and he appeared lost without one. How much did all this cost? Less than failing would have. "I'm asking seriously." "So am I." He looked up at her. "You spent most of your savings, didn't you?" "No." "How much is left?" "Enough that it remains private." The answer irritated him, but not with the old confidence. He put his hands into the pockets of his coat. "I came because we need to talk. Then talk. Could we go inside?" "Helen is coming for the chair in 10 minutes. This won't take long. It usually does." Evelyn checked the knot around the protective cloth. Daniel climbed onto the porch and stood on the other side of the blue chair. Up close, he looked tired. Gray had spread at his temples. A faint mark beneath one eye suggested his glasses had rested there all day before he removed them for the drive. For months, Evelyn had imagined this meeting with sharper dialogue. In some versions, Daniel apologized before she spoke. In others, she recited every expense until the numbers shamed him. Standing beside him now, she felt no urge to perform the year. The cottage had already answered. Daniel touched the edge of the chair's arm cover with one finger. "Laura thinks we should make an offer." Evelyn looked at him. "For the cottage," he added. "I understood. You'd get back what you put in, plus the current value of the land. You could stay here while you look for something easier. And then? Then Laura and I would keep the place." "For what?" "Weekends, holidays, maybe rent it occasionally." The orchard gave a soft, wet hiss as wind moved through the remaining leaves. "You gave me a worthless cottage to get rid of me," Evelyn said. "Now you want to buy it because Laura likes the porch. That's not fair." "Which part? I didn't give it to you to get rid of you. You brought me here without checking the heat or water. You told me to sell before winter, then left before I got the door open. I thought it had been winterized properly. It had, for an empty house. I didn't know the condition was that bad. You told me it was worthless. As a house, at the time. It was my house at the time." Daniel stepped back, struck by the simplicity of it. He looked through the window into the front room. The repaired armchair sat near the built-in shelves. The scratched maple table held a lamp and a bowl of orchard apples. The room was warm but plain, its age visible in the sloping floor and uneven plaster. "We could make you a good offer," he said. "No. Don't you even want to hear it?" "No. You're refusing because it's us. I'm refusing because the cottage is not for sale. You considered selling in January." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "How do you know? Stephen told me he'd come out. He told you private details? He told me you decided not to list, that's all. You already knew that. I called you." Daniel took his hands from his pockets. "Mom, I'm not trying to trick you. You're doing well now, but this is still a lot to manage. If we owned it, you could keep using the shed. We could work out some arrangement." There it was again, a place for Evelyn inside someone else's arrangement. "No," she repeated. "Then what about family use without a sale? Laura and I could help with expenses if we had regular access. The price of visiting me is not part ownership. That isn't what I said. It is what you keep meaning." Daniel turned toward the lane. His sedan stood on the wet gravel, polished dark against the autumn colors. A year earlier, Evelyn had watched its taillights disappear while water dripped into a pot. "You've decided I'm the villain," he said. "No, you have. Villains are simple. You're my son." He faced her again. "You brought groceries after you left me. You gave me the space heater. You invited me to Thanksgiving. You also kept waiting for the cottage to defeat me so you wouldn't have to admit what you'd done." Daniel's jaw shifted. "I was worried," he said. "About me?" "Yes. Or about becoming responsible for me." The question landed between them without volume. Daniel looked toward the orchard. Mist had begun to thin above the upper rows, revealing bare branches against the charcoal sky. "When Dad died," he said, "everything came at once. The house, the accounts, the calls. You wouldn't answer questions. You'd sit at the kitchen table for an hour with the same cup of tea. I was grieving. I know that now. You knew it then. I knew the word." He rubbed his thumb across the porch rail. "I didn't know how long it would last. I thought if I got the house sold and got you somewhere smaller, then there would be an end to the decisions." "For whom?" Daniel swallowed. "For me," he said. The admission was quiet. It did not repair anything. It did, however, belong to him without disguise. Evelyn leaned against the chair back. "You could have said you were frightened," she told him. "I wasn't frightened. You were arranging my life so it wouldn't frighten you." A reluctant, painful half-smile moved across his face. "You always did that." "Did what?" "Correct the sentence until I had to hear it. You used to listen faster." "I was younger. So was I." His gaze moved over her, silver bob tucked behind her ears, weathered hands, work jacket marked with a dark spot of rain. He knew her face. What he seemed unable to reconcile was the life around it. "I didn't think you could do this," he said. "I couldn't do all of it." Daniel frowned. "I hired Mateo for the roof, electric, porch, and structural work. Ruth gave me water and rides. Customers paid me. I bartered. I made mistakes. I ruined $300 of fabric. I nearly sold after the pipe froze. That sounds like doing it. It sounds like living among other adults." For years, Daniel had treated dependence as a door with only two positions, entirely self-sufficient or entirely his responsibility. Evelyn had once helped teach him that. She had hidden fatigue, corrected his problems before he saw them, and called her labor ordinary until he believed it cost nothing. "I should have asked you for more help when you were younger," she said. Daniel looked startled. "What?" "I made care look easier than it was. Your father did too. We let you think houses stayed standing because someone owned them. This isn't your fault, no. What you did is yours. What I taught is mine." A truck sounded on the lane behind Daniel's sedan. Ruth's pickup appeared towing the small trailer. Helen sat in the passenger seat, both hands lifted in delight when she saw the chair. Mateo followed in his work truck, having agreed to help secure it because Ruth's shoulder had been bothering her. Daniel stepped aside as the vehicles stopped. Helen was out before Ruth turned off the engine. Oh, Evelyn. She climbed the porch steps and stood before the deep blue chair, touching nothing at first. Then she laid her palm on the velvet back and smoothed the nap upward, changing the blue in one broad stroke. "It looks like my aunt's chair," she said, only the version she believed she owned. Evelyn smiled. "Sit in it before you praise me." They removed the lower wrap. Helen sat, leaned back, and placed both arms along the rolls. The retied springs lowered evenly beneath her. It doesn't tilt to the left. It shouldn't. It always tilted to the left. That was damage, not personality. Helen laughed and handed Evelyn an envelope containing the final payment. She did not ask whether Daniel was family or customer. She simply thanked Evelyn and carried the removable cushion toward the trailer. Mateo lifted one side of the chair while Evelyn guided the dolly beneath it. Daniel moved forward. "I can help." "We have it," Mateo said, not unkindly. Daniel stopped. Evelyn and Mateo rolled the chair down the path. Wet leaves clung to the dolly's wheels. Ruth lowered the trailer gate, and together they positioned the chair between padded blankets. Evelyn fastened the first strap. Mateo secured the second and checked the tension. Daniel stood beside his sedan watching. There was no crowd, no announcement, no humiliation. People were working. He had arrived without a role and could not manufacture one by taking charge. When the chair was secure, Helen embraced Evelyn quickly. "I have a settee," she said. "Send pictures first. You ruin every romantic moment. Settees do that." Ruth waited until Helen was back in the passenger seat, then looked toward Daniel. "You staying for supper?" she asked him. Daniel glanced at Evelyn. "He hasn't called first," Evelyn said. Ruth accepted this as a complete explanation. "More potatoes for us." The trailer rattled away behind the pickup. Mateo gave Evelyn a small nod, climbed into his truck, and followed. The lane quieted again. Daniel remained by his car. "I'm not selling," Evelyn said. "You and Laura will not use the cottage for weekends. You will not send an agent, calculate my remaining years, or call your plans help. All right. If you want a relationship with me, come as my son. Call first. Ask whether I'm free. Bring nothing you expect to own." He looked back at the cottage. Amber light rested in the two front windows. The chair was gone, leaving an open place on the porch beside Evelyn. "Can I call Sunday?" he asked. "You can call Saturday and ask whether Sunday works." A trace of the old Daniel appeared in his expression, the boy irritated by a corrected seam, a rewritten number, an answer that required one more step. Then he nodded. "I'll call Saturday." He opened the sedan door. "Daniel." He turned. Evelyn took the 3 cottage keys from her jacket pocket. She had carried them on the same plain ring all year. For a moment, his eyes fixed on them. She closed her hand around the ring. "I kept the keys," she said, "not the terms." Daniel looked at her, and this time he understood. After he drove away, Evelyn swept wet leaves from the small porch. She turned off the shed lights, checked the stacked firewood cover, and locked the green door. Ruth's kitchen would be warm. There would be potatoes, probably too many, and an argument about whether Mateo had taken the good wrench again. Evelyn looked once at the cream cottage, its repaired roof dark beneath the clearing sky. Then she went inside to wash her hands before supper.